know if we've got a quorum or not, but since we don't have to vote on anything today, we're lucky. So we're going to go ahead and start off, and we don't have any new introductions tonight. Everybody knows Catherine. She's been here long enough to be a veteran.
I'm an old timer.
She's a veteran. We're delighted to have her here, and what I hope to do is to move us through the agenda that we can hopefully stay true to getting out here at noon. You know, people have flights or anything else, so we may go to 12:15 since we're starting 15 minutes late. But Curtis is supposed to join us, and also Lynn. So
Lynn is on her way, but
fantastic.
She's closer to Bastrop than to Austin.
Okay. I think we better start then. So. Each of you should have a package, and I don't have anything to report from the committee chair's report, so we're going to dive into the agenda today. There are no action items. That's good. The first 7 items, 3 through 7, are written progress reports, and the first of those is on the Perkins 4, and Catherine Dykes is going to be here to present that to us as well as answer any questions. So, Catherine, you're up.
Okay. Well, Perkins 4 is coming right along. As you know, that will be enacted very soon, and the Perkins team here, in collaboration with Texas Education Agency, Perkins Department, is also working on the transition plan, and the transition plan must be submitted by April 07, and we're in the process. And what you have here on agenda item number 3, written report, is just a progression of a timeline that we have gone through. And in our discussions in December, we have met with community colleges. We are updating the guide for instructional programs and workforce education, as well as collecting information, submitting data. And also we'll be meeting with representatives from the Texas Association of College Technical Educators to discuss definitions and programs. I have also been in brief communication with Commissioner Paredes on reserve funding. The decision was made that we will take a percentage of reserve funding out from the 07 allocation, and we're in the process of submitting recommendations to him as far as the usage of that funding.
Catherine, will you remind me, is it we can use up to 10%, is that correct? 10%. But the thought is not to use up the full 10%. I'm trying to remember the last board meeting we discussed that.
We decided that to use the full 10%, which is about $3.8 million, that would represent an excessive shock to the system. People have relied on that money in a particular way. So what we're going to do is withhold a smaller amount with the idea that we can develop some pilot projects and test them, and then if we find that they're successful, we might use a larger chunk of that discretionary amount. But the whole purpose, to underscore a point that we've been making about this, the whole point of looking at the Perkins money is to make sure that the way we use it is more closely aligned with achieving the goals of closing the gaps.
Okay. Any questions at all on Perkins? Okay, Catherine, thank you so much. The second agenda item is one that we're all interested in, and that's an update on HB1. And Lynette, are you going to walk us through this?
I certainly can.
And let me say, this was a format, I think, Commissioner, that you had used in one of your testimonies, I think. And we had asked that staff go back and try to put this in a format where we can track this at every one of our meetings. And what I'd like to see, Sister, just to go through, because this is so much of what we're all about right now, and that is to walk us through each of these and give us an overview of what's happening. I know we've probably all each read this, but I know I had some questions as I went through some of these points. I'm sure Lori and Wayne did too.
Well, what's nice is that we've got folks in the audience, and David here, who might be able to help us with some of the initiatives that are going on in other divisions. For instance, the education research centers. We had a timeline that Susan Brown and her staff had given us, and I understand that it may be pushed a little bit with the holidays coming up. So maybe, David, do you know if the last information I had, is Susan?
Yeah, Raymond, I think, was involved in the last discussion of that.
Yes, I received a phone call yesterday that the original deadline for the submission of proposals for these research centers of January 15th placed an undue burden on the potential applicants. And so David and I are going to discuss about pushing that deadline back from January the 15th to the end of the month, January 31st. We wouldn't extend it any longer than that, but it seems to me fair that probably, since we haven't gotten out the RFP yet, that giving people at least a month to work on it makes sense. So we'll talk about it, make a decision, form the board right away.
The reason for that, some of you may know, is that by working through TEA, we had a number of things. We just had to cross a number of T's and dot I's that took a little bit longer than if a single agency had done it. They would have had the same experience with us. But they have signed off on the materials. We sent it to the governor's office and the LBB on Friday. They have to sign off on it. So we actually have
The MOU you sent to them?
the MOU, and the TEAs agreed that they think that with the content of the MOU, they agree with the RFP. So now we just have to get the leadership's approval of it, and then we can send it out. That's really what we have to do. And as the commissioner said yesterday, he received word from one system that they were concerned, and that because of the holidays, that they were likely to submit a multi-institution proposal, that it will take a little longer. And so this will help them do it. And what that would mean is, if we go this route, that rather than asking the board to approve it, that we would ask the board to give the chair and vice chair permission to approve the designation of the centers following the meeting. And we think it would be probably 2 weeks following the board meeting if we give them an additional 2 weeks.
David, or anybody, I know that, and it says here that we've got 1 year's funding for the 3 research centers. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
And that then they're going to have to be self-funding after the first year. And it looks like, when we say self-funding, that's going to have to be coming from grants and gifts and fees. And I guess my question is, as we help put these together, have we defined from an accountability standpoint what we want to see in terms of tangible results coming out of the ERCs, and for me, explain to me a little bit how this is going to benefit us long-term in terms of the data and the research coming out here, and then how do we go back out and make sure we can get these self-funded in terms of how they're going to be measured in terms of their effectiveness?
Well, I think it's a very strong RFP, the request for proposal. The overall purpose of these research centers is to track, to gather information on certain critical issues related to educational attainment. The broader context is to gather data that will help us understand how well we're doing in terms of achieving the goals of closing the gaps generally, and more specifically how we're doing in terms of achieving some of the results associated with House Bill 1. Now, one of the criteria that we're going to evaluate in the proposal submitted is the capacity, the ability of the proposers to raise money. Everybody understands that the money that's embedded in this, in the establishment of these research centers is startup money. And this is a common practice in academia, where you simply give enough money to get a project underway, but you don't intend at any point to fund the centers long-term. So we're going to evaluate how well the individual, the principal investigators of the proposed projects, how well they've done in terms of raising money for their individual or institutional research projects. We'll measure the capacity of the institutions. They'll be giving us information about their plans for making the research centers self-sufficient. So all those things will be taken into account as we evaluate the proposals, or as the proposals are evaluated.
That's right. To add one thing, one thing we added to the mix when we took over this project was to include out-of-state reviewers, people who are top researchers in the areas that are designated for the centers, so that prior to our boards making a decision, that these folks can really evaluate the history and credentials of these folks, that they don't just write good proposals, but they've produced previously in other efforts. And I know at least a number of the folks who may be submitting do have some history of successfully receiving grants, but they'll also be able to look at the organization of the proposed centers to see if it really makes sense from their own experience. So that's another layer of evaluation from people who don't, or from another state but are very successful and can look at these from a bit more of a distance. So we think that will be helpful. We can provide for you, if you'd like, a copy of the RFPs. I can get some copies of those and have them to you this morning. I can go ask somebody to copy those now. And so, I mean, there is time if you see something. But I think they're well done, and TEA has scanned them a lot, so they have signed off on this at this point. So I hope you're fine with it as well. But if there's something we need to change, we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
How much of an overlap could there be with something like, say, the Dana Center or some of the current research, either not-for-profits that are part of an institution or that are currently involved with institutions?
I am sure centers like that will submit. In fact, I think that what I'm hearing is that there are at least 2 or 3 centers like that in the UT system are going to submit one proposal. We actually have in the RFP encouraged collaborative proposals, so we get more people at the table and we pool their resources. So yes, that is likely to happen. We understand, we've referred estimates from 8 to 12 proposals will probably come in for these centers, and so among those are some of the folks we know are already doing things, and there are probably going to be some that are a little bit newer to this process. I don't know that the Commissioner would specifically point out, there are some areas for research outlined in House Bill 1 that they specifically want to address, such as research related to teaching and characteristics of good teaching, curriculum issues. The House Bill 1 primarily focuses on, if you read it, K to 12, but we added in the closing the gaps and some things related to things we think are important to really expand the scope, or at least make those things that focus at K to 12, take in mind college success and the connection with that in a way that wasn't, originally there. And those people we've talked to, and at least legislative staff we've talked to, are happy to see that.
Some of these issues are very, very complex, and there will be overlap not only with other research projects in Texas, but around the country. For example, one of the hot issues that's emerged in the past couple of years is finding ways to assess the effectiveness of teaching. We don't know. This might be startling to some, but we don't know what the components of excellent teaching are. When we talk about merit-based pay, one of the concerns about paying effective teachers more is we don't know what effective teaching is. How do you measure it? How do you quantify it? I think we probably have some qualitative notions of it, but we don't. It's very difficult to measure, and that's one of the issues that a lot of people are taking a look at now.
do you think it'll also have something to do with the accountability system that we've already developed for higher ed, and it could mirror some of the indicators and give us more information to begin to maybe put some teeth into the accountability system?
Well, since the focus is primarily on effective teaching in K through 12, it may not have a direct bearing on our accountability system, but clearly we've recognized that there's also an increasing interest in measuring the effectiveness of teaching in higher education, and we will be developing accountability measures that take that into account more precisely.
These centers aren't going to do everything. There does need to be some focus, at least related to what's in the legislation. One thing we haven't talked about is there will be a policy advisory board which will review the research agenda for the centers. Beyond whatever is in the proposal, they'll come annually, or they can come more often. And the way the legislation is written, the agencies can ask the centers to undertake, but with compensation, certain types of studies. So initially, that compensation would be through the $3 million, and then later, if we wanted something specific, would need to fund it in some way, potentially, not necessarily. I know, I've worked with some of the people who probably will be submitting in the past. I know some of them have offered to do things. We've actually had them do some analyses on occasion, which they've done for nothing. Others never would do anything for nothing, and I understand that as well. But there will be an interaction between the policy advisory board and the centers. The commissioner and the commissioner of education will chair that body, and each of them will designate, I believe it's 6 people to that board, so I believe it's 14 people will be on that board that sort of interact. So these are some of the questions that are most important to the state that we answer.
Wasn't that policy advisory board put in subsequent as a recommendation from the governor's office? Was that right, or was that another advisory board or another initiative?
No,
I think the one you're talking about has to do with the vertical team.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was the vertical
Yeah,
team.
this
Right.
this is actually something like this is in the legislation. Of course, it's written in such a way it could have taken some different forms.
Can I ask one more question? We don't want to beat this to death, but Commissioner, you had noted that one of the key things they're going to be doing is really trying to research the most efficient ways to gather data to determine how effective we're being in closing the gaps, and also determine our ability in terms of achieving the goals under HB1. And one thing that we talked about, as you remember in the College of Texans meeting, was that whole issue, Catherine, of being able to measure our effectiveness. And so what I'm hearing is these ERCs are not going to be so totally charged with that. It's basically going to be using them as a bridge to determine effective ways of gathering that data, but we're still going to be challenged with the issue of how do we measure the effectiveness and our efforts in the GO centers and throughout the state, and how effective are we being under HB1 here at the coordinator?
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Other questions on the ERCs? Okay. Why don't you give us an update on the college readiness? I think, again, we read this on the vertical teams and where we stand there.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. I think as the staff has been working on all of the HB1 activities and initiatives, I think what we've discovered is how interrelated all of these activities are. And while, the ERCs were a separate part in HB1, and, the programs to enhance college readiness and the college readiness standards themselves, the vertical teams, we're discovering how interrelated they are. And it's kind of difficult sometimes to pull these things apart. But just wanted you to know that we've seen that there's a lot of overlap, and which has been really good because it's created a lot of teamwork within the agency to work across divisions and across sectors, so that we're working as one unit to get all of these things implemented. The vertical teams, as you see, the rules for the Commissioner of Education will be effective in January 10th, and that's what we've really been kind of waiting for. because our rules, which you folks adopted in October, are already effective. But what we have done is Glenda sent out an email December 5th to all the colleges and universities requesting nominations for the vertical teams for our end so that we could kind of a jump on the process. So we're in the midst of collecting those recommendations from the colleges and universities for our part of the vertical teams. Hopefully we'll be able to get these vertical teams in place in January because my understanding is that TEA is going to begin their process, even though their rules aren't effective, that they're going to begin to pull those teams together. So
just one thing, the posting for comments for the TEA commissioners' rules ended yesterday, and they received no comments. So it means that they really have the green light, basically, to go forward.
And then we plan to meet over the next several months. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take us to get recommendations from the vertical teams, but we anticipate being able to bring recommendations to the board in October for those college readiness standards. That's just the first part of what these vertical teams will be doing. Then they have to talk about instructional materials, curriculum alignment, all kinds of things after that. So their work will continue after the college readiness standards are recommended.
Lynette, is this the original timeline? I don't know why. For some reason, maybe it's that we had to have the vertical teams formed and put together by January. For some reason, I thought that we were supposed to have the college-ready standards defined by January. Am I right?
We originally had an earlier deadline, but as we worked with TEA and discovered that because of their process in getting rules adopted, that we've had to push this deadline out a little bit.
It's now being pushed out 10 months.
Yes.
One thing I've discovered, just so you'll understand it, about the rules-making process is the TA rules-making process is much longer. And the reason for that is that they entered into this agreement with the State Board of Education so that they didn't have to go through them to do certain things. It really has stretched that process out longer. So how long is it?
60-day comment for...
Well, the comment period, after the rules are prepared and gone through their process, it's a 60-day comment period that follows. And then the implementation is 60 days after that.
So it's much, I mean,
It's about 6 months from start to finish in most
since
occasions.
the rules have to parallel, it's really been something that's been, new for the staff here and having to accommodate that process. And I have to say that at least Dave Anderson, their attorney, has tried to work with us quickly to at least get some things in sync. But that's one of the adjustments that's having to be made. It's because the HB1 requires in several cases that we both have rules, and those rules need to be identical. It really is slowing the process down, and that's just something we're continuing to face.
We're learning to work together. It really has been, I think, a great process in learning the disconnects between K-12 and higher ed. I think are mirrored by our agencies, and I think it's been a good process for both of us to learn how the other works, what their processes are, and to accommodate each other. And I think we're doing a much better job than I'd say even 6 months ago. So that's where we are with vertical teams.
Are we working with whatever Just for the Kids used to be, and now it's the Center for whatever it is, accountability, academic accountability? Is that the name of it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
National Center. Yeah, Tom Luce's. There was a conference in Dallas. Did anyone from the staff go to that, where they were talking about college readiness standards, and that they're going on their website with publishing a lot of things that I would hope that we're working with them, because they brought back some concerns that were sent to me from some friends that were at that conference.
Chris Doherty, and I've forgotten who else from NCA gave us a little seminar on that probably 2 months ago. We provide NCA with a great deal of data, We have an ongoing working relationship, and
Okay,
we don't
good.
always know everything they're doing, but we've emphasized to them that since we give them, they would like to have more information from them in terms of recommendations of what they do. So Chris was very good and brought over folks a couple months ago. And it may be that we need to schedule something on a regular basis with them. Make sure what they're doing and our staff is aware of it.
I think it might be helpful to understand that as we work with our vertical teams, we intend to bring to them a number of different college readiness standards, sets of college readiness standards. So as we look at the various, like ACT has standards, Dave Connolly's worked on the Standards for Success, the American Diploma Project. And so as we work with the vertical teams, we don't intend to start from scratch. So we certainly can make sure that we're looking at the information from Mr. Luce's group as we look at these things and work with the vertical teams. What we want to avoid is starting from scratch.
Right.
You know, my only concern is does this push out the whole time frame? And again, I'm really speaking from memory, but if I remember, the original plan was college readiness in January, and I think it was to kick out, and I forgot what the first component was. I don't know if it's English. It's going to be in October or November. Is that right? Does that, and there was a lot of discussion at the board about that, as you remember, about why does it take us 4 or 5 years to roll out 4x4, you know? And so does that push all that out, since these vertical teams won't get college readiness standards defined till October?
Well, and we've been talking to TEA about all of that. Much of this is, for them, is tied to the textbook adoption. And so as we've talked to them about the concerns that have been raised at the board meeting, and I think it actually came up in some other meeting about the public ed, higher ed, I think it was Mr. Adams' group.
I think it was.
So we've been talking with TEA staff to see how we can shorten that process, because that's what they're dealing with, is those timelines for when they review the text as they're working with the 4 discipline areas. And they've got a timeline that does go out until 2012.
Yeah.
And so we continue to talk to them about those issues. Again, this is one of those places where we're trying to figure out how to work together and come to the same place at the same time. I think part of the reason, too, that we've pushed out this timeline to October 2007, we really believe that it's going to be incumbent upon us to do a good job of building awareness about just what are college readiness standards. So at the same time, and this is one of Catherine's assignments in her division, is building awareness of college readiness standards. How do we get information out so that when they're adopted, information has been shared with various stakeholders so that they at least understand what they're for, what the impact is going to be on particular folks, like a parent, what does this mean to me? Business and industry, what does that mean to me? So that we're going to be doing that in tandem with the work of the vertical teams, is building awareness about just what college readiness standards mean. So we'll be working with the P16 councils, the regional P16 councils, the field specialists, and actually getting that word out about what those things are in this process with the vertical teams. So that's part of our thinking in this process, is that's got to be working at the same time.
And we're not waiting for to work on other areas when, for example, we're slowed down by the process of rulemaking. We had a meeting yesterday with the deans of schools of education and deans of schools of arts and sciences yesterday, and we talked about some critical issues. How do we prepare teachers more effectively to work in the classrooms? There was a cover story in Time magazine yesterday about how we have to prepare children very differently to succeed in the 21st century. We had a conversation yesterday about people from faculty from universities working in these vertical teams, Now, the deans in particular, because it's their primary responsibility, they have to find ways to recognize that kind of activity, because that's usually categorized as service on university campuses, and usually that means that faculty will either not be rewarded or will be penalized for participating in service activities. And we made it very clear that deans have to find a way to reward faculty for participating in activities like vertical teams and improvement of K-12 education. So we're trying to work on several parallel tracks simultaneously, and so the short answer to your question is we're doing everything we can to adhere to the original timelines, and where we get slowed down in one area, we try to speed up in another.
One thing that wasn't mentioned, and Lynette may want to go into more detail, is that the big issue at your board meeting is going to be David Connolly from Oregon to talk about this very same issue. And this is really, in some ways, almost a textbook from which the coordinating board is really working. So this will be a public overview of his work and what's been developed related to college readiness standards. He's based in Oregon, and your opportunity to ask questions. But so the staff has done things regardless of this not being in place at this time, and he actually has already provided another seminar some months back in which TEA participated, and there are a number of activities related to this for folks outside the board meeting when he's here. So despite the rules not being placed on the other side, there's some things that are still proceeding, trying to get the word out on here's really the basic framework we're talking about, and Lynette may want to say more.
Dr. Connolly is going to be here for 2.5 days, and what we intend to do is really work him. He will be giving a presentation to us, but we've invited the colleges and universities that are going to be here to meet with him. Staff will have an opportunity who didn't attend his first session with us to meet with him. We're inviting a lot of folks from TEA to come over and meet with him. I believe we're going to have a taping with the commissioner and Dr. Connolly on this whole issue that we hope to broadcast through Starlink. So we intend to take this opportunity and get as much information as we can from Dr. Connolly on the work that he's done. And his work, as we've looked at his work, he's really done more than just college readiness standards. He's done a lot of work on the connections between high school and college. He does a lot of presentations on those kinds of things. So I think we're going to be using him a lot, and we're going to contract with him to help us as we move forward with college readiness standards and implementing those standards.
And to be fair, we are also trying to work a deal with TENT, which is the network for public schools through the Education Service Centers, so that he could, on Friday morning after the board meeting, do a presentation that would be picked up by all the Education Service Centers, and they would in turn invite people from the public schools and I guess the colleges and universities in their area, so that they could do
Interactive.
sort of a session where he presents, and then they could provide questions for him to answer.
And what we're trying to do at the statewide level doesn't necessarily impede what can be done regionally or locally. For example, the El Paso Educational Collaborative, for the first few years of its existence, its primary goal was to decrease dropout rates. And then they focused on passing, getting more of the students in the El Paso area to pass the various standardized tests. Now the El Paso Collaborative is focused on college readiness. The Houston Independent School District on its own has established college readiness as a top priority. So momentum is building around the state on these issues, regardless of how quickly or slowly we have to move in terms of rulemaking and so forth.
Any other questions about vertical things, Elaine or Lori? one final comment. I would encourage us when we present, I hope in the same kind of format to the board, because it's such,
Will.
the board really wants to understand HB1 and where we are. And I think it's really important that we communicate to the board where we have had variations in where we thought we were going to have things happen and where they're going to be lagged out, so that we're effectively communicating to that board and we can explain that. The other thing I'd like to make sure we do is, I heard you say we're getting recommendations in from the different universities about members on vertical teams. Kind of go back to the commissioner's comment about, are we seeing active engagement where we're getting good recommendations for these vertical teams? And so a status report on that as to if we're getting the kind of composition that we want to see on them also. Because the work they're going to do is awful important when you look at HB1. So, okay, I'm through with my suggestions. Y'all have anything else there? Okay, yeah. Ms. Phillips, welcome.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay. I did the same thing. I read all of the Ms. Barron's emails about the 2007 meetings.
Right.
And they were all starting at 10 o'clock, and I thought we're starting at 10, and I looked at those seven, and I figured it out.
So you were early.
You did? I thought you probably did, so.
So Mr. Ryder was early.
I was just trying to get everything on everybody's calendar.
It was a very effective planning, but a very, I can understand how you did it. So
I wasn't going to admit that, but since you asked.
Okay, Lynn, we're still on, going through HB1, and we're on page 3, and I said we were going to go through this briefly, but we're spending a little more time on it.
That's okay. This is an important issue, so.
College credit program, that's clear. Section 501, Lynn's where we are.
We've been working with TEA. This is actually coming out of Dr. Stafford's shop. His staff has been working with TEA on this. The dual credit issues are really the pieces that we have input into, because the 12 hours of college credit really can be met either through IB or AP courses. So the overlap for us is just in the dual credit area. Now, my understanding from talking to Dr. Stafford and his staff is that we believe that our rules are flexible enough, our dual credit rules are flexible enough, that there should not be any problem with students in high schools offering these, the number of hours they want to offer through dual credit. But as we actually get into this in the fall, I think we're going to be looking at our rules much closer. It's going to be an ongoing evaluation to make sure that they are flexible enough as they're actually implementing this. I think some of the challenges that TEA, our staff, are discovering about this is as they implement this particular piece, as well as the 4x4 curricula, it's how is it that they're going to offer these things to like the smaller school districts, rural Texas, who may not be able to attract the teachers to either cover the math and science areas. Well, this is one way that they can do that, is through either dual credit, AP, or IB. Dual credit's probably an easier way to address that because you have those connections with the colleges and universities. And we have ways in which that information, those courses, can be offered through either the Virtual College of Texas or through other distance learning opportunities from the universities. So we believe this will help not only in offering students college credit, but may address some of the issues with the 4x4 curricula. They'll be able to offer some of those things through dual credit. So I think we're on top of it.
Is there a timeline when each school district has to have implemented that program?
They have to offer the 12 hours by fall '07.
Fall
They have to be available.
If I might add that Ms. Bricker and I met with the Houston Independent School District yesterday, and I talked to Glenda about this a little bit this morning, but there may be some additional issues, at least in terms of dual credit, which is not rules-based, which is simply a resource issue on one level, is that we understand that at this point, HISD, which has been very interested in this, and HCC, which has been very interested in this, but at this point, they're really reaching a limit in terms of faculty available to teach the dual credit courses. And then there's also an issue in terms of the faculty unwillingness to go to certain high schools in HISD, given either the nature of the school itself or the location. I'm not sure which, probably both, but that's something that we have to be aware of, and clearly was a concern there. Ms. Bricker may want to add to that, but I think that was helpful just to hear that from them yesterday.
Well, that and pretty much everything that they had to say, I think was real helpful for David and for me to hear, which leads me to say that I would hope that as we talk about the alignment issue as well as just about every issue of House Bill 1, that we have an opportunity to really drill down into I guess maybe the regional service centers would be a good opportunity. I'm trying to think what would be the smallest yet reaching the most amount of people, but the regional service centers where we could really meet with the superintendents and key staff and board members and let them tell us some of the issues, because David and I both were very surprised at some of the things that Houston had to say as far as their resources and ability to offer dual credit, the questions about curriculum, the fact that if it's a teacher that's teaching that course, they have to have 18 hours in the subject area, which they typically don't have in a master's level. So David said, the course redesign, the virtual learning opportunities, maybe we need to get really, really creative and supportive to help these school districts figure out how to do it.
I think one of the things that Dr. Stafford's doing with his staff in the course redesign, he's really looking at course redesign as the vehicle for implementing a number of different things, and he's looking at dual credit as part of that. How can we redesign courses so that they're offered in a format that may address some of these issues that you're talking about? So I really think that he sees this course redesign not this way, but more globally in how we can address a number of different things, including dual credit. So I think that's a
California offers a whole sequence of AP courses online. The University of California has funded that project itself. We ought to look at, we heard about Florida doing something similar yesterday. We ought to look at the possibility of offering dual credit courses, AP courses online for those high schools, those regions, those parts of the state that for whatever reasons simply can't marshal the resources to do them conventional ways.
Certainly do that. One of the things
they talked about was the inequity. They said it's going to be an issue of inequity, and pretty soon people like legislators are going to look around and say, wait a minute, that's not right, and it isn't.
It does become a resource issue. I think one of the things that we're learning in working with TEA, they have the TETN network, we have Starlink, among other things, that they're really so different. But how is it that we can work together between those two networks and VCT, the Virtual College of Texas? How can we work together to address some of these things so that we're indeed maybe collaborating at least in working with the ESCs through the TETN network, using Starlink, Virtual College of Texas, so that we can address some of these issues more effectively. So again, it's one of those learning opportunities.
Well, and I think that it's a good faith effort. Certainly, like Alamo and San Antonio and Austin and Houston and HCC and Dallas. I mean, certainly they're all making a good faith effort to have the kinds of relationships. And I don't know if, like I said, being creative, if you're a teacher in a classroom and you have the virtual program and then you don't have the 18 hours in your major or in the major, but you can still facilitate that course. I mean, I don't know if that's
the way it's done in some states.
Okay. Oh, and actually they referenced California, and David and I both smiled because yesterday, HIT said, well, I wonder if you know what's going on in California. I said, I think so.
Well, we certainly can look at California.
HB1 did not provide any funds for distance education in regard to these kind of things, did it?
Probably not.
There are no funds for the delivery of coursework. through
This
that.
particular
No.
12 hours.
We see ourselves using distance delivery for the public awareness outreach efforts, for working with groups when the vertical team, when we have the standards adopted, when we start working at the regional level, we think we're going to be using all of these networks in that way, and there is some money to support that, but not for direct delivery of coursework.
There's no reason, for example, that schools and school districts could use that, what is it, $275 allotment
Right.
to pay for distance education. It's a matter of priorities.
I wonder if, have we been in conversation at all with the UT Online High School and Texas
Oh, yes.
Tech? And so they might be able to, since they've been up and running a while.
But you know, if you're a community college and the school district is not a in-district tax-paying part of the community college, then it's very expensive. If you're in district, I don't know how the other community colleges do that, but in Houston, if you're within HCC's district, then the courses are free, and you pay, I think, just for the textbooks, which are expensive. But if you're out of district, how does that work? I mean, it seems like it would be really expensive to make this work. And I didn't think about that. You
varies.
brought up a good point.
I think the numbers, you know, I think Texas Tech and UT would be very interested in the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that might be taking their courses, and they could, you know, make some deals, I would think.
Good point.
Okay, other questions about college credit? And one thing is, we talked to that, and again, I keep making suggestions how we can modify this, but just to see if we can, under implementation, something that'd really be interesting, I think, you know, there are a lot of what I would call, I don't know if I'd call them impediments, but challenges that Laurie brought up, such as the resource issue and the limit on faculty to teach and limit on willingness to go to some high schools. And I just throw this out as for us to think about is, I would almost like us to see us put a section or each of these sections that is the challenges that we're facing in getting this pushed out. So that we can keep that before us, the committee and the board, so that we can say, as opposed to come back in here and we say, oh, this is the status, to say, these are the challenges, the impediments are helping, keeping us from getting this done. It's not to point fingers, but it's to say, how do we garner our resources on a statewide basis to solve this issue to move HB1 forward? So, and I've heard those kind of challenges brought up in all three issues we talked about. So I would suggest we do that.
For the board meeting, we will do our best to have that included.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Texas Governor Schools.
Well, we're about to move into high gear with the first Texas Governor's School for summer of 2007. We've been, Evie and I have been talking, mostly Evie, talking with UNT in putting one in place quickly, since they have TAMS, and I'm not sure what that stands for, but that's
It's the Math and Science Academy.
and Science Academy that they've been doing, and they have the infrastructure in place to be able to do this, and they're very excited about offering one of the governor's schools for this first year. Since we're running out of time, they're going to have to get out a lot of information across the state to the schools, applications to make sure that they've covered appropriately the various areas of Texas to get a representation of Texas in the school. It will be 3 weeks during the summer, and the kinds of things that will be offered will generally be math and science, but they're even talking about having a leadership track, so they're going to see if they can actually implement some of that and bring in speakers from legislators to business and industry. We were talking about robotics and nanotechnology and all of those kinds of things to get kids fired up about math and science. So we think we're going to have that in place pretty quickly. And then it's a matter for the following year is actually doing an RFP to establish other governor schools up to 3.
I think this is a good example of the staff looking at how to get something done quickly. I mean, the preference in some ways would have been to do an RFP this year, but
Right.
there just wouldn't have been the time to get it up and running, and so the staff looked at existing institutions that already had at least summer programs with students or were accustomed to working with high school students in a way to get something going earlier rather than later, and talked with legislative staff about this, and they were really encouraged that they found a way to make something happen sooner. But next year it will be more like what one would typically expect, and which would expand the pool.
One of the issues that I guess the challenge that we've had with this really is a TEA responsibility in the law. And we received that charge later, and so we're trying to implement that through TEA. We're working through an MOU with them. They are actually having to put forth rules to the commissioner's office so that we can implement this on their behalf. So that's one of the challenges that we've had to work with. And TEA has been very good about handing this off to us in a way that's been very helpful. So again, one of those challenges that we've managed to address and work through.
Any other challenges, except for that?
Just the timing issue.
How would a program that's in existence know about this? What forms of communication are going out to the universities to make sure that they know about the opportunity
You mean for this year or for the coming year?
for this year, for this summer?
We've not contacted other colleges and universities. We've simply tried to identify from what we know about what's being offered out there to make sure that what we offer is a good quality program. And so, no, we did not contact the colleges and
So
universities.
if it's an existing program, I'm thinking about the Center for Mexican American Studies, Tacho Mendiola's program, or there's another program in the engineering department that partners with a high school. Those are, Center for Mexican American Studies, I don't know if it's a separate 501c3 or nonprofit or whatever, but so would they necessarily know about it, or should they know about it, or are you looking for?
Ms. Berger, what we did is in the state through the legislature, there are 2 academies that have high school students actually attend an academy delivered on the university campus in lieu of going to high school. And there's one at the University of North Texas, which is on math and science, and the one at Lamar University is liberal arts, I believe.
So leadership.
And so what we were trying to do, because the difficulty of actually housing high school students on a campus poses issues that many colleges and universities aren't readily equipped to do for an extended period. And knowing that the requirements of the legislation, it's math and science, arts and sciences, or leadership, I believe was the vote. And so we made contact, and the UNT program actually is set up in a way that it fit our need to move very quickly. And what our problem is with the timeline is that they need to announce no later than the middle of January the opportunity that this is available to the counselors in every high school in the state.
So
And they have to- Next year, we plan to do the full-blown request. We were just caught under the gun because we're already way behind to make this happen. And we didn't want to wait till March to get the word out, and then students wouldn't have an opportunity to actually apply.
This would be the best way to make sure that the first iteration of it was successful, that we wouldn't have problems associated that had nothing to do with academics, but perhaps problems with the students' life on campus.
And this may be the first time those kids are away from home for a period of time. And we wanted to be really sensitive to those kind of issues.
The big communication issue the first year is getting this information out to the high schools, as Glenda mentioned. And one of the good things about UNT is they have that network in place already. So then the next year with the RFPs, there will be more time for institutions that perhaps have not had this type of program before to actually plan and get all the pieces in place so it can be successful and something you want, someone's child to go to.
And we'll have to get the RFP started pretty quickly for the next year, so that they have ample time to put their infrastructure in place to deal with these challenges.
And the other thing, we will need to have the legislation amended that moves the responsibility from the education agency to the coordinating board, I would think, as a part of getting all the appropriate budget moved to the coordinating board.
Mr. Chairman, I don't feel just totally comfortable with our just having picked somebody. There are some other very experienced programs out there that see summer students. Like there's one at Tech that travels, which is something we might want to think about in our RFP. It's in cooperation, I believe, with Parks and Wildlife, and they go to camp facilities like Palo Canyon or somewhere like that, and they pay for all the transportation and everything. They teach kids to build rockets. I kind of like to go to that myself. Anyway, I'm just wondering, what are we going to tell, when this gets out, what are we going to tell these other really established programs? We're going to say, we had a problem with the timeline, and we decided to do this, and you can do the RFP.
And I think that's exactly what we tell people, that we were under a timeline, that in order to make this one successful, because otherwise we'll never get funding to do it again. If word gets out that we're not doing a good job with it. I'm sensitive to what you're saying, and we've had a lot of discussion internally on how are we going to do this. I really believe this is the right thing to do for us to be successful. And our plan is absolutely to run it the appropriate way for the following year. We just need time to gear up for it.
Maybe if we get the RFP out soon, that'll take any sting out of it.
And I think that's part of our announcement.
I think we ought to do that.
Great point.
I think we should be able to get an RFP out later this spring for next year. Go ahead and get that done. I think we ought to do that.
That's what we have
We
planned.
can do that.
I'd encourage us to do it sooner than later, though, because when word goes out, we pick NT to do it, then those kind of questions will get asked when, as you're saying.
What are the liability issues? This university, the hosting university.
It's the hosting university where the issues are related.
Well, you're dealing with minors.
Right.
That's a huge issue.
15 and 16-year-olds.
Are there any other criteria for the students other than high achieving?
There is no definition in the statute for other than high achieving students. And so that's part of what we will be negotiating with the institution as to how the students will be selected for participation.
One of the things that we're very sensitive to is that those schools be representative of the state. And so we will include that in the RFP, and that's something we talked to UNT about. Yes, these are high-achieving students, but we want to make sure that we are, that the students that participate aren't all one kind of student. They're not all from Dallas. They're not all from Pine Park.
Right. I didn't know if there was any breakout of economic disadvantage.
Not in the
or
law.
Regional.
Would you like to recommend that we explore that?
Yeah, absolutely. If we're going, I mean, you made the statement some of the kids may not have ever left home. Well, that's not indicative of high achievers from affluential areas, I don't think. I mean, just as a general bad stereotype maybe, but if we want to really do something robustly and reach those that truly would be able to say that, I think they come from a host of areas that are either rural or economically challenged or et cetera. So,
Does the law specifically say that this should be done in the summer?
I believe it does.
We have that.
Summer residential program.
Summer. I'm just thinking that that's a bit of a hindrance. There are so many facilities that could be available, like, say, over a winter break or something, like the Hill Country camps, residential facilities. Maybe we might see if they could flex that a little bit in case something develops.
Okay. Might be a good opportunity as well.
But you want it to 3 weeks,
That's the problem, is how do you do that
so.
Yeah.
during a school year?
But I think it's an awfully valuable experience, even if it's, I'm just saying, that's sort of, it would be nice if the law had more flexibility in it. So as we get more experience with this, we could do more camps for more people,
Okay. Let's move on to Section 508, the Strategic Action Plan for the College Readiness and Success.
Let's see here. We have a number of initiatives that come under that strategic action plan. What we have tried to do, and you'll see this in the board agenda materials for the January board meeting, is what we've tried to do is take the strategic action plan that's in the law and the one that the two commissioners presented to the Senate Education Committee in April. They're really different plans, and so in working with TEA, we've been very deliberate about combining those two plans so that they really are, it's really one plan that encompasses all of those elements so that it addresses all of the things that we're working on together in House Bill 1. And so the strategic action plan that you folks will see in January at the January board meeting, I think addresses all of the elements in both of those plans. What you will see is not only the objectives, which is the piece that you will be adopting, but also the working plan that we have in place to put all of the elements in place. So there is the action plan, which will be a part of what you see, but but you will not be adopting that piece, because that changes depending upon, timing issues and financial kind of considerations.
Lynette, do we have a copy of this where we can get this to the committee to see?
Certainly.
January
We can do
meeting?
that.
Just-
It will be in your agenda materials for January,
Right.
but we can get copies for you right now. Georgia,
Okay.
can you do that?
Like,
And it's a plan that was adopted by the P16 Council, so it's now going forward to the board and the Commissioner of Education. She also has to adopt it. So that's where we are with that plan.
questions?
I do have a question. I'm sorry, I don't know this. Can you explain exactly what the P16 Council is and who's on it?
Oh, certainly. Or maybe the Commissioner can do that. Since he's on
The
it.
16 Council is chaired by Shirley Neely and me, and we have two other members. One is a representative, one of the three commissioners of the Texas Workforce Commission, and the other one is the commissioner of DARS, Department of, what is it?
Assistive and Rehabilitative Services.
And we are now looking at adding members to that body.
It's in statute, so this is a statutorily required group, but, and it does provide for the commissioners to add other members, so.
Is there a thought that it might be an umbrella for all the P16 councils?
We've talked about that. We haven't discussed it in depth. I think we'd want to see more P16 councils actually working around the state and to ask, and once they're up and running, ask them what they think an effective model for coordination and coordination would be.
Within the P16 Council, they do have committees that, I think there are 5 committees that address, or 4 committees, that address specific issues, and on those committees are representatives from K to 16, and business and industry if they're interested in the particular issues, if they want to participate. So there are 4 committees that work on specific issues and provide recommendations to the P16 Council itself. For instance, one of the committees worked on dual credit and made some recommendations to the P16 Council on the dual credit issues.
We had a committee that worked on developmental education.
Right.
And is the P16 Council's home, is it oversight the legislature or the commissioners, or how does it fit?
I think probably the home is jointly TEA and the coordinating board.
For instance, the commissioner is now will be the chair beginning with the next meeting.
Convening chair.
Convening chair, because they are co-chairs. And so then the responsibility for staff work comes to our agency for that. Although we do work with them and set the agenda together with TEA, with DARS, and with TWC.
Is there a way that the agenda and the minutes from the meetings be sent to us and maybe the different P16 councils so that we can kind of get a feel for what everybody's doing?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
That's great.
She's the staff person for the P16 Council, she and her staff.
And is there no board oversight of the P16, or is our committee the oversight group, or is there just not one?
Well, you oversee everything we do, so that you could be involved in P16 to any extent that you would like. You could be involved in helping establish the agenda, evaluating some of the reports that are produced and so forth. It's been it's actually been it's only been in the past year. For about the first year that I was here, the P16 Council was not terribly active. It's only been recently that it's become more active. It's only been recently that I think it's begun to realize its potential. So it's still very much a work in progress. I expect that now that it's over here, it'll move more actively. We welcome your active participation.
Mr. Chairman, that maybe that would be a good thing for our committee to help out with. Maybe.
I think it would be. I think starting off, just being able to see the copies of the minutes and agendas that Lars recommends would be a great starting point.
That's a great idea.
Do y'all meet quarterly?
Quarterly, yes.
Quarterly, the next meeting we anticipate is going to be February 14th. It was set for February 7th, and TEA has a conflict, but I can get that date to you, and it is a quarterly meeting. And if you'd like, I can send you the last agenda and minutes from the last meeting that was held.
I think maybe also would just be what you anticipate will be the next agenda items to be addressed in February, so we can look at those in advance and provide any input to say, why can we also look at this or evaluate this and that, as opposed to looking at everything after the fact, being able to get out in front of it a little bit.
And we can certainly do that, and Commissioner Glenda and I, along with TEA staff, we've already started to draft that agenda, those agenda items, and you're seeing some very similar already today. So we wouldn't want any surprises.
Good suggestion. Okay. I'll finish. Any other challenges in this area that we need? I know we're.
I don't think so.
Okay. Programs to enhance student success.
Mr. Chair, I believe this is where the bulk of our funding that's come for HB1, other than the ERCs, is going to rest in these programs. We have a number of initiatives that we hope to kick off in January. We've done a lot of planning over the past few months, trying to figure out how we're going to address all of these initiatives. For instance, innovative developmental ed initiatives is one of those, and Catherine and her staff have been working on how to implement that. That's again where Dr. Stafford has done some work with course redesign. He's also addressed how the course redesign of developmental ed we might be able to do some things in that area. So that's another area where I think there's some overlap.
And later on in the package, you talk about that money that will be allocated out of the outreach success, and that was like $3.7 million. Is this where most of that money is going to be allocated, is in these programs right here?
She answered it.
Again, the summer bridge programs that are already in existence, you all.
There are lots of those.
Yeah, there are a lot of
We
very
understand that there are a
successful
lot of good summer bridge programs, and so as we develop an RFP for this, we'll be looking at what those institutions are already doing. I think one of the things we've discovered is that we have a lot of learning to do. There are lots of things that are going on in the colleges and universities and in K-12 that are successful, and what we have to do as a staff is learn about those initiatives and see if we can replicate them in some way. So we'll be looking at that as we develop the RFPs for all of these various initiatives. One of the initiatives under this is providing financial aid for college readiness assessments. And so we're working with College Board and ACT on how we can facilitate covering some of the costs for those, and it's for educationally disadvantaged students, so we do have to narrow the scope. At one point we thought, well, there's enough money in here that we could cover all students under PSAT and plan, but we discovered that was a bit of a stretch, so we're having to narrow our scope a little bit and go back to just those educationally disadvantaged, which is the free and reduced lunch, those students in that area. So what we plan to do is target our 3 target areas with that particular initiative in this short period of time. We're going to try to do this. With the PSAT, we've missed it for this year because that was in October. But with the plan, in using that particular assessment, which, by the way, is the ACT equivalent to the PSAT that's offered in the 10th grade. And that can be offered at any time. So what we hope to do is have a spring, an opportunity for students in our targeted areas to take the plan in the spring. And then, it's a feedback loop, using that information to inform what we're doing in professional development for teachers to make sure students and teachers understand what does this mean? I've taken the plan. What does that mean for me? Where are my deficiencies? Where do the teachers need to target their professional development activities to make sure that students are ready for college? And taking then the ACT, they've done a much better job. So that's another one of those initiatives in programs to enhance.
What's the timeline for developing programs, and how does that tie in with the funding? I mean, is this cumulative funding where if we don't spend this money, you'll lose it?
Yes.
But we're hoping to get...
We're asking for carryover authority,
Right.
but we don't know if we'll get it.
Okay.
That's one of our legislative issues that we're going to try to get carryover.
And I just wanted to point out, Dr. Phillips, in the summer bridge programs here, maybe some of those programs that you're talking about would apply to the RFPs we put out under this initiative instead of the governor schools. And they would be offering summer bridge programs. We've got enough time on those because they don't have to offer it statewide. They could have a narrower focus. It could just be the city of San Antonio or Houston or something. So there is an opportunity for other kinds of good programs to be offered.
And those summer bridge programs, what we intend to do is not only offer them between the senior year and their freshman year in college, but also back it down into the high school. So it's between, for instance, the 11th and 12th grade. To provide them the opportunity, using the information they get from either TAX or PLAN or some of the PSAT to help bring those students up to college readiness. So all of this, as I said, much of this overlaps and feeds into other programs.
One thing we really need to bear in mind, Lynette mentioned there are a lot of bridge programs in place. As you think about that there are a lot in place, but we are where we are now with all those programs in place. So as we go forward, one of the components of this really has to be a real evaluation of what we fund and a cost-benefit analysis and consideration of scalability. Because while we have many programs, we don't know this, but I think that the total number of students touched by them remains relatively small. So the scalability is something I think we need to look at for the future. Since we're looking for solutions, and while they may help those students that are there, are they helping enough students? How do we identify those things that really can be more broad-based?
I think that's a good point, David. I think that's what we've discovered about a lot of the things that we're embarking on is how do we make sure these things are scalable. So as part of the evaluation process of any of the initiatives that we're embarking on, that's going to be one of the questions that we're going to have to address.
How much, going back to something Lynn said earlier, how much flexibility is there to have it in a time other than the summer, or is there none?
Well,
It says
from the
summer.
bridge program.
I know. I asked it for a reason.
So I don't know how we could define summer if it would be.
Let's take off the summer and just call it a bridge program. There are private schools that have very successful programs called Intercession, where they basically close down business as usual and they have like a very serious, focused 3-week session or 1-month session or whatever. And I'm wondering if we're missing the boat. A lot of poor children, for whatever reason, may not have access to a program in the summer, may not be able to go to a program in the summer. I'm wondering if we're allowing flexibility for school districts to do it whenever they want to do it. If they can figure out a way to do it, why don't they do it with the college or university or however they want to do it?
I think one of the things that we can do, because in this section of the law, it states other programs as determined by the board to help us meet closing the gap.
Okay.
So I think
all
there's
we need.
flexibility.
Other
We're using that.
uses.
We're using that for a number of things. So we have that opening to provide other kinds of activities. As long as the funding is there, we're certainly open to doing that. So I'll make a note.
A question, Mr. Chairman, I don't quite understand this number 3 under 508, or the third point. Financial assistance programs, is that so students may take these courses, or is it, these tests, or is it to prepare them?
It's to take the test. It's the fees for the test.
Okay, well then I think we might want to do a little survey, if we could, and see to what extent this is being taken care of.
Well, and we have some information from the 3 target areas. We're working with both, we've had meetings with both College Board and ACT to figure out where those activities are already going on. For instance, there are some districts that already pay for that.
Right.
By the same token, in coming years, do we want to be able to offer this more equitably across the state, or at least in those 3 target areas, and instead of saying, well, you already pay for it, so we're not going to offer this opportunity for you. But we're trying to do some things in the short term so that we can actually get some information that can be used by the colleges, by the ISDs in helping to get students college ready. So what we want to do is be able to do something this year, and then next year we'll have a much better opportunity to make sure we're addressing some of the issues that you're talking about.
I just think this is one of those areas where a lot of people who care are taking care of things like this, and we don't want to act like we're up here,
Oh, yeah.
the Wizard of Oz, saying, well, we're going to make this possible.
You're absolutely right, and the $275 high school allotment is where some of those funds are being used for these things specifically.
These local education funds, that's another group, a whole, hundreds of groups, that if we could get in contact with, it would certainly be wonderful. They're doing a lot of that, too, a lot of this as well.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Other comments? Okay, the last section is the course redesign, which we talked a little bit about, but
It should be nice if Joe was here. because I probably know least about the course redesign of all of these initiatives.
Would you like me to do this one?
You probably have a bit, yes. Would you please, Dr. Barron?
We are moving along with this really at a fast clip. 3 courses have been identified. You know, we've got the deadline. I'll just remind you, next fall, the courses have to be available to be, at least one course has to be available to be taught next fall. So we had to jumpstart. We put together a jumpstart committee to advise us, and we tried to get people on that committee who were with institutions who had some experience with course redesign, or they were moving in that direction. So we put together some people, and we now have identified 3 courses that will be worked on during the spring and will be in some state. At least one of those are going to be ready for the fall. We believe all 3 will be as we're moving forward now. One of those is the first comp course, and it is a joint project between the LaCroix Center of the Dallas County Community College District and Texas Tech. They each have been working on the same course. They are now married up in order to bring that one in on time. There is a U.S. history course, and right now UNT, I believe, is the lead on the U.S. history course. And then there is a Calculus 1 course that is the UT Telecampus, you know, here in Austin. It's based here in Austin, and that is working with UT Brownsville and others. And Dr. Stafford's here. I apologize to you for not inviting you to come to be here for that part, Joe. If you would grab a microphone.
Sure.
To respond to questions as we move forward. Now, as this is going along, we're also working on the RFP that will be put together and sent out to all the institutions for the second round that we hope to start up. We're not waiting till next fall to do it. So it will be a process that goes on. I explained about the jump-starting committee and the 3 courses that are underway, and if you'd like to add to that or just respond to questions.
I probably better just respond to questions at this point, if there are any.
I think one of the things that Dr. Stafford has done a great job with is seeing how course redesign, how all of the other initiatives can be pulled together and addressed through course redesign. And so, for instance, the dual credit issue, core curriculum, you know, they'll be looking at those issues. And it, you know, there does become a timing issue as we're putting in place the college readiness standards. How does that affect what they've already done in course redesign and what they're planning to do in phase 2? But he's done, I think he and his staff done a great job in addressing those things.
Well, to pick up on that just a little bit, if I may, then the 3 courses we're trying to get underway immediately. One in mathematics, one in composition, and one that's a reading intensive course, the history course. That essentially parallels what we've always dealt with in the TASP and then the subsequent developmental tracks. It's the old classic reading, writing, arithmetic kind of phrase. But by redesigning those 3 courses as our starting point, and we will subsequently deal with some other entry-level math courses, what we begin to create is what I would call a freshman foundation package. If you can bring students successfully through one course in each area, the math, the composition, and the reading intensive course, you really have addressed the foundation. You've dealt with the developmental or remedial question by successfully moving through those. And so that is where we're trying to focus in this first round, and then we'll do the more competitive process and bring other folks into the mix in the second round. The other part of that that's kind of interesting is if you sort of ask the question, what do you need to know to succeed in those 3 courses? You have in effect defined college readiness standards. if you get down to the nitty-gritties of what you need to know, you've dealt with alignment. So if you have those 3 courses properly aligned with the high school curriculum, then and you almost can't design a course if you don't know what your alignment is with the students coming in. You have in fact addressed the alignment problem. Now, I'm not suggesting that we're going to have all of those problems solved for the courses that we offer this fall to meet that part of the statutory requirement, but we will have had to address the question. We will have to have asked the question, what does a student need to know to succeed in these redesigned courses? And then sort of the parallel of that is we have to have asked the question, what do we want them to be able to do, and what are they expected to know when they come out of the courses at the other end? So having been explicit and clear in the design process about both coming in and going out knowledge and skills, we're well along to addressing procedurally how you address alignment and readiness. And it goes beyond the old classic catalog thing of the prerequisite for course A is course B.
Questions for Joe? Is this timeline right that we will not issue a summary report until 2011 to the legislative committees? Top of page 5, I mean, it's...
Yes, it's in the law. That is true.
So in 2011, we have the big report, but we're going to have a report every quarter between now and then. So.
Okay. I just, yeah.
Mr. Chair, what I'd like to just in summary of all the activities that we're doing with House Bill 1 and the work that we're doing with TEA and how we're working across the agency on all of these initiatives. I think one of the things that we've discovered is what's going to be important to the success of any of these things is to make sure that K-12 teachers, higher ed faculty, our P16 councils, I think there's going to be a need for building awareness, but at the same time a lot of professional development, because this is going to, could ultimately change our whole public education system, K through 16. And so that's one of the components underlying all of these initiatives is how is it that we're going to make sure all of the stakeholders that are involved in this have the information they need to do what they need to do. What is a teacher in middle school going to need to do to make sure their students are college ready and that this alignment is all the way up? There's going to need to be some professional development that TEA and we are going to need to address. I think the commissioner and Glenda's work with the colleges of education is very important, and the commissioner is going to give a report on that. But that's all a piece of this. But even more so, I think the faculty in higher education are going to be surprised probably at how this is going to change what they're doing. The comments the commissioner makes about the dumbing down of curricula in higher education. Well, if students are coming in college ready, what does that really mean for an entry-level faculty member? That changes the way in which they teach, potentially, hopefully. So professional development is a big piece of what it is that we're going to be doing in all of these areas.
Composition course that we're currently working on redesign, once we get several of those designs out there, we're talking about probably on the order of 4,000 sections of composition now. So a couple thousand people who are teaching that course. To get them all thinking about the issues in somewhat the same way will be an interesting challenge.
If we do this project right, we'll create templates for these redesigned courses and how institutions can can achieve better learning outcomes for their students, and in some cases achieve some substantial cost savings simultaneously, and that's pretty remarkable.
Even if we were to achieve those improved learning outcomes at a modest increase in cost, it would be a heck of a deal. But it does look like we actually will be able to reduce costs.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it very much. Again, we spent more time on that than probably we allocated, but I think it's so much of a major focus of what we're looking at. And again, I would just encourage us when we update this report that we do put the challenges that are in front of us that are keeping us from proceeding, so we can update the board on that and keep our eyes on it. Okay. Agenda item 5 is the web tool update, and Catherine is going to give us an update on that.
We have been working in association with the UT system staff on continuing with the student web portal idea. I believe that's been going on for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, or some time now. I'm looking at Chris because he's got longevity here and he knows about that. But basically, what I want to say about the web portal is that I believe now part of the issues that we've had in getting it off the ground has been the funding. And now we're looking at a couple of pockets of funding that are going to help us to at least get phase 1 implemented. And according to the report, the student web portal is basically the vehicle. It's going to carry the information, the data. It's going to be a centralized clearinghouse, so to speak, for students to be able to go in to access college information, to make application, to find out about financial aid, scholarship information, to house the electronic transcript records. And with this statewide vehicle, so to speak, for all of this data, we anticipate that much of the initiatives that's going to come out of HB1, we're going to be able to do also a better job of it. And with the assistance from the UT system, they have developed 3 phases in order to get this accomplished, because we do anticipate it's going to be a very large task. And one of the next things, phase 1, as your report shows, is the actual branding, the specifications, and how we're going to market this through the state. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to bring people from North Carolina College Access Portal and Louisiana Web Portal, who is brand new and going through all of these growing aches and pains, and hopefully learn from them. So we have been in communication with these folks, and we anticipate putting a meeting together come January to discuss these ideas and how we might learn from them, now that we feel as though we've got the funding identified, at least to start on the phase 1. As you will see in the report, there's also an executive steering committee made up of key agencies and a working committee to actually help us to make sure that we have the design, the components, all of the criteria, that we have effective evaluation of how this is going to work, and we have a really strong marketing piece to follow it.
If we're already submitted, do we have grant request outstanding for this first $630,000?
As far as the funding sources are concerned, we anticipate what I've proposed is that out of the $600,000, a small bit of that is going to be in-kind services. But if we look at least $500,000 of it, I'm asking for 60% coming from HB1 funds, and we also have submitted an amendment to Perkins for Perkins 3 to fund 40%, and the reason we came up with the 60-40 split is that what we anticipate is that technical students are 40% of the population for Texas that are going to obviously use this vehicle as well.
Okay. The only reason I ask that is I go back to our, Don, our meeting at CFT, and there was some movement by some of our funders to be willing to shift around some of their funds during that meeting. And I don't know if there's any follow-up on that. I don't know if that's a possibility also if we're not successful in.
Right, and what I anticipate, because phase 2 and phase 3 are still going to have to come in, so I'm hoping that, my thought was that a good faith effort on our part to actually start off with the 600,000 to get this off the ground, and then when we have meetings January, February with the foundation, with key stakeholders, with some folks from Gates Foundation and such, so that they can see what we have brought to the table, and then our request to them to continue with the implementation process as we go into phase 2 and 3.
It's really not online. I mean, it's technology-based, but you're not like actively online when you're entering in information. Students, are they?
My understanding is
They are online?
they are, yes.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of like a internet type distance learning or whatever. They have synchronous, where they have somebody, a live person that they can talk to. It seems like that would be really amazing for a grant request, to have a staff paid for, 24/7 to respond to questions that students may have while they're online.
It's an excellent idea, and that's one that we haven't really talked about.
I
But
mean, I know it's probably expensive and it's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
massive, but wouldn't it be amazing if students could enter in questions, or, I'm looking at this form to fill out, or application or whatever, I'm trying to decide my coursework for the senior year or whatever. I mean, it seems like it'd be amazing.
Well, that's a great idea, and what we anticipate is RFPs to be sent out for each one of these phases, and possibly we might combine phase 2 and 3 in one RFP. But those types of ideas is what we're looking for, innovation to come in, and for the vendors to say how this is going to look and how it might, and bring in all of those pieces of uniqueness to it, so that we touch all those avenues.
The only thing related to that I've seen, we had a demonstration from a company that does online advising 24 hours a day. A student could go in through the portal and contact a counselor and tutor. If they're having trouble in a particular subject, they could go that way, or they could talk to a counselor about, a number of issues. But that program, and I can't remember who it was that delivered it. It was one of those, Lynette's gone, and Chris is gone, who were here, who saw it.
Oriole, as I recall, more than counseling.
That was one of them when we saw, and then we saw the kind of advisor, away kind of person. But they were expensive.
I know.
Was it Career Cruising that has the advisor?
I've just lost.
They've certainly had other tools like FAQs and all sorts of stuff. And we have to remember that the kids coming up now are very well versed on the internet and can maneuver their way around. So if we provide tools via technology in the website, they'll find it. So we need to maybe balance that.
Problem, I would think, and some of you know more about the public schools than I, but with counseling is that you run the danger, I think, of the counselor not being aware of some important nuances in individual school district policies, where they might actually advise them to do something that might, and to what extent one could do that. So I think at least if we had counselors, we'd have to sort of define the range of things that they could answer. Because even yesterday in the meeting with HISD, it was clear that that they felt the community college didn't know certain things about them. They didn't know it was clear they didn't know certain things about the community college. And these are people that are immersed in that local level, so we'd have to define it. But any way we could get them better information, that would be good.
I actually have technical support. I also see it as a piece of technical support, so that if I have difficulty in maneuvering, or I don't understand a resource, a form, an instrument, a tool, or whatever, that I have somebody live that I can interact with, just to kind of technical support when you have problems with your Microsoft or, your computer, whatever that you can call in.
Have we had conversations with the other states that have the system in place, and not just with people who sort of run it, but
We
With the more
have
the
talked
user
to a number of states, like through email and telephone, who bought the CAN systems from scratch. Or a portion of the state that has its school districts accounting. But I think the Louisiana and North Carolina people are
I think Oklahoma's doing this as well.
the ones that have been identified as having something similar to what we're wanting. And that meeting, has it been finalized as to when we're going to have Louisiana and North Carolina discussions?
Not yet. We're in discussions also with Lois.
We've set it up for Louisiana. We've set it up at 2 p.m. on January 12th.
January 12th. Okay.
This is one of those projects that, is important, but I wouldn't want us to spend a dime on it until we had decided how we were going to deliver this to each individual student. Because it's all fine to do this, but the students have to, we've got to know how they're going to get it. One of those states I read about issued, with the student ID, they issued their password on it. So when the student got their student ID, they had, the password on there, and that was the way they conveyed to them that they already had a place. And so I think that's the number one thing to think about. Because if we do all this, it doesn't matter how elegant and beautiful it is. The students use it.
You also brought up an issue before in terms of the access to computers, students,
Every student's going to have one though, right, Raymond?
Well, there's a national survey that's looking more and more so that way, but that is part of this,
It is.
whether it's going to get to the students.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's all kinds of equity issues there.
We're also taking this issue to the next state P16 council. And Matt Oram, who's really heading this up from the UT system side, is going to do the presentation, and we'll be able to answer more technical kind of questions as well.
I do think Lynn's comment's a real good comment, because, we're getting ready to spend $500,000 plus in the first quarter of this year in terms of phase one, if I'm reading this right. In terms of using, Perkins as well as HB1 funding, and I think that's important. We do address, how the students can be able to access it.
On another end, you may have addressed this when I stepped out of the room, but to what extent is this coordinated, and I think it is, with the TEA effort in terms of electronic transcripts?
It's part of it.
And it's linked.
Right. Yeah, the transcripts won't reside there, because the transcripts are going to reside at the school district. But there'll be a mechanism to go out and get them when a student applies for admission, and automatically bring it over to the college to which they're applying.
The same thing will happen with the common application.
Right, right, yeah. All that's being linked up together.
Apply Texas.
Right.
Okay. Other questions?
Well, I guess I'd just like to say I would like to have an answer to this before in January we decide it's okay to spend this amount of money.
Chris, any input?
Not really. Other than the mechanism itself is really a hub. It's really going to link to Texas College money. It's going to link to Apply Texas. It's going to link to, hopefully there was a discussion of linking it to the information from the ACT and the SAT and talking to those folks over there. But really having it be a hub of sorts and being able to attach all these other pieces to it. The issue that Dr. Phillips brought up regarding the informing the students as to how they log in. I think, universally, I think in North Carolina, any of the states that we look at, it's going to be different for Texas because of our sheer size alone. The number of school districts we have in the state is not comparable to North Carolina. North Carolina has a one system in place, higher ed wise. It's not, you're comparing apples and oranges. So I think with our state, it's going to be important for us to meet with these other states and find out what they're doing individually and figure out what way we can come up with that would be innovative enough to meet the needs of Texas. And I think it's going to be different than any of the other states out there.
I think the thing what I'm hearing is that before we get $500,000 into the game, you know, we want to have that defined. And I think a perfect example is that Top Cat. I mean, we spent $160,000 on Top Cat. Now, I'm not being critical, we got the results in here, but a year down the road, we came back and we didn't have the number of hits that we wanted on Top Cat because we hadn't effectively, we had not that message had not gotten out about what Top Cat was and what it could do, and so I think it's the whole issue. Let's don't reduplicate that.
We need to present to you some effective strategies for how these different tools are actually going to be used, how we're going to drive traffic to these particular tools, and that's what we spent so much time designing these Top Cat and participating in the design of the web tool. Now we have to pay attention to how do we conduct activities to ensure that these tools will actually be used.
I think that's really important. You know, things exist, and even earlier when Lynette was talking about the need for in-service, a big part of a lot of this is communication, how to get the right information to people who need it. Something like this, one of my concerns would be the students who are probably already going to college are most likely to find it.
Right.
How do you make sure that the students who aren't as familiar go there and use it? I think that's the big challenge. I think that's probably a big piece of what Ms. Phillips is getting to, and I have that same concern, is how do we make sure those students really can benefit from what's there. When Spricker and I, when we were in Houston, another thing that came out is at least the central office administrators we met with, at least after the superintendent left, was not aware of Top Cat.
Never heard of it.
And Linda tells me they've communicated with every high school there, yet then, you know, these curriculum folks weren't aware of it. So I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge, and you can't assume that people will go someplace just because it's there. You have to drive the traffic, as the commissioner said.
And in our planning, we can't just say we're going to have a statewide marketing campaign. That won't cut it. It's got to be, we've got to know exactly how the sort of student you describe is going to be able to access this and is going to be likely to access it. I mean, it's just like we were developing medicine and we didn't make a plan for how we were going to get it to the villages, you know, and how we were going to get the outlying people to come in. I mean, it won't do any good if we don't have that, and I just don't, I think that's step number one.
Can I
Mr.
provide
Chair,
you?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think the Top Cat criticism, it's okay, we can take criticism. I don't think we did a very good job with that. One of the things that we've discovered in our work on Top Cat is, as the higher ed agency, how do we communicate with K-12? Do we do that on our own? Do we do that through the K-12 system? You know, TEA has connections to K-12 in a way that we don't. And I would imagine more and more of the ISDs, at least at the high school, know who the coordinating board is. But, you know, otherwise, you just get something from the coordinating board, which all of these folks did. They don't know who we are. So how is it that we communicate with K-12 in an effective way? I think that's one of the things that we've discovered is a challenge.
I think how are they getting that information to the students?
Right.
We had thought,
Assume that that's enough, is that we let them know.
we had given the information on Top Cat to the P16 Council, which represents Harris County Department of Ed, Region 4, school districts, you know. And I said, you know, part of our mission, you know, part of our job is to, when we find out about whatever it is, information about conferences, information about laws, bills, you know, anything, you know, your responsibility is to distribute that information. And I gave it handed it to the director of guidance and counseling in the school district, and yet
Right.
they had no clue. They'd never heard of it.
Well, and we had worked with the Urban Curriculum Council. We had talked to them about TopCat, gave them the information. These are all the directors of curriculum for the 35 largest urban districts. So, you know, in our efforts to get the information out, obviously it didn't happen the way we thought it was going to happen. So we've learned some lessons.
I think we ought to consider, you know, thinking about everything a totally different way. I would love us to be able to sit down with one of our partners at AT&T, who's helped us so much with the Go Centers, and see, you know, I know there are privacy issues, I know that, but, you know, we need to communicate with the students. You know, forget the counselors, forget all those people. We need to communicate directly with the students. Here's this thing for you. Maybe AT&T can, and all the other companies will be willing to send public service things on the cell phones, and maybe that's legal, probably not. But, you know, we need to think like that and go right to the students with
Put an
these
ad on their
products.
bills that come either online or, you know, put something in there. Do that.
And that's an interesting idea, because I know many of the cell companies are now sending you text messages.
Right.
About
That's what I
products
mean.
on occasion.
Yeah.
We can get a text
And
message.
why not? And we have a connection still with Singular, do we not? For AT&T and Southwestern Bell through John Montfort.
Oh, yeah.
And that might be at least a beginning point. to
Well, if
see
one
it's
of them
possible.
did it, the other ones would do it. I just really think we've got to think like that, because y'all have seen already. You did try to do it the traditional way.
Well, I think it's an important issue. I will just say, Glenda and I made a presentation at a school district, and they had never heard of TopCat, and we just sat back and explained what it was. I think I mentioned this, and they all went, why haven't I heard about this? This is a school board, this is superintendent. And the response we got back was, we have got so many different initiatives coming at us through TEA, through everybody else, that we don't have time to figure out which of those initiatives is important for us to focus on that's going to enhance our students in terms of being college ready or whatever. So somehow we've got to find a way to break through that, you know, to be able to, and also not to throw 10 priorities out there. We need to say, here's TopCat and here's this student web portal. These are, and these are critical, and that's what we focus on. We drive that out to the field specialists, drive it out to the Go Centers, and then, I love Lynn's idea. I don't know if we can do it legally, but you know.
I'm sure it's
We can do it differently.
But to do it, they're being bombarded
Yeah.
with all these initiatives. And so, it's a statement more than a suggestion.
Well,
but it's,
TEA has a list of all of their school districts, obviously, and all of the school districts have all of the principals. What would happen if TEA and the coordinating board, weekly or monthly or whatever, put together key points and sent them out? Just like we get the events of the week from the coordinating board. We get all the events. What if they sent them out? You know, here are the key issues going on, and then
I'd put it in the subject line.
yeah, no, right.
I don't think they're going to open that.
Well,
I mean, I'd condense it down.
right. I mean, just bullet points.
Yeah.
You know, we
Who to contact.
We learned something about that when we were doing the first governor's letter, and we sent emails to all the, was it the superintendents, and got some responses. When we faxed it is when we got most of the responses. So I think you're right, Mr. Chair, that there's a lot of information that they're getting, and they just don't know how to wade through all of that and see, well, this is important and this isn't, or less important,
we need to help them figure it out.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay? I mean,
with our partners at
we
TEA.
need to help them figure it out.
I think the best way to do that is by getting the students really more involved at the local level and getting our G4 students to communicate with one another with regard to the products that are out there, the tools that are out there. I know you talked about AT&T sending out the message, but I think it carried that much more clout. It was from another student. It was from a peer. We saw last year the marches that were held across the country. That was not done by promoting stuff on the radio or TV. That was the bottom line was getting text messages on cell phones. That was how it was done here in Austin. I don't know a better communication tool to reach peers than either going online and setting up a MySpace account, communicating with them that way. Because my daughter has one, and 250 kids are on there at one time, chatting it up. But again, communicating using the vehicles that the students are using, and not necessarily trying to have it come down from the counselor, but maybe it comes from a student up to the counselor. If the counselor's going to go out and seek out that information once they're put in that position.
Sort of interesting. I'm not sure how this is functioning. Is MySpace the one the schools have to?
MySpace is just like a.
Well, there's one of these operations like MySpace where there's some school control, and so that they keep sort of the outsider out of it. They have to be affiliated with one of the schools, and that might be something that we might need to think about tapping into with the web portal. If it's someplace they're already going. I mean, I know my kids do that through their school, and it's some.
Is that Facebook, Chris?
I don't know. I just know she's.
But there's one in which you have to have a school ID from one of the participating schools to go in. So one of us can go in and harass the students or do whatever.
Well, I think the summary is we need to find a way to drive the traffic to what we're spending money on.
Exactly.
I think the commissioner wrapped that up. And so what I'd ask the group to do is before we get a lot of skin in the game, say $500,000, that we have some tangible recommendations as to how we're going to do it. And thank you, Dr. Phillips, for making this point. Okay, let's move on to the Top Cat update on agenda item 6. We can talk about it, but
As we've already gotten into the Top Cat subject very well. Some of this written report which you have is some historical information, some information on the marketing as it was proposed from the origination of Top Cat, and also the last part of the report talks about a relaunching of the marketing efforts. One of the things that we have talked about in the division is to come up with a very strategic plan in which we're going to market, and I'm hearing from this table that you're very, very focused on this effort, and I'm glad to hear it, because I feel as though in talking that we have perhaps done some hit and miss marketing out there, but it hasn't been strategic and often and in the correct venues and ways in which to make sure that we're truly getting the word out successfully throughout Texas. So one of the things that we're also going to be doing with HB1 funds, as we were talking about building awareness, is to actually do some contractual work with a marketing firm, an advertising agency, whatever, to actually help and define what that's going to look like. And using those type of tools or a template, so to speak, we're going to be able to take that and replicate those ideas across a lot of these initiatives. So it may not be just for Top Cat that we're looking at this marketing plan from a contractual sense from the HB1 funds, but certainly what we're going to learn from that, we're going to be able to replicate it across all of these major projects, the web portal, Top Cat, or whatever. A new aggressive marketing strategies is definitely going to be a top priority for us as we go forward with these. We have also heard these kind of concerns from the commissioner and the XO, at our XO meetings, in that this piece is extremely important. And on this report, you will see on the bottom of the first page Top Cat usage since October 2005 and the types of totals that it has generated, such as nearly 5,000 SAT signups and approximately 2,000 ACT signups, questions answered, words viewed, type information. And it's also my understanding that through this contract, TEA is is communicating with Zap Corporation, where TopCat came from, in doing an evaluation. And that report has not totally come out yet, but because it's fairly new. But this is some of the results that we did get from the Zap Corporation that they knew instantly from online. Since April 2006, we have provided TopCat training to over 1,000 counselors and other stakeholders through streaming video on the College for Texans website and to P16 field specialists, and we'll continue to do that. Over 231 middle and high schools have also received this information directly from their P16 field specialists. We understood that TopCat was difficult to find on the TEA website, and I think this might have been one of the concerns that Dr. Phillips had brought up, and we will be in communication with them to see if there's something that they can do. These websites are extremely important. The TEA website in particular, it is a strongly visited website by public education people, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I find myself, when I'm needing some information about P16 councils or whatever, I go to the TEA website and I'm able to find that information. And it's accurate, it's up to date, it's very factual. They've got a great search. They do a wonderful job. And I don't know what kind of crew they have there, but working on that website. So I anticipate that we certainly can bring that to them, and that they will look at helping with promoting TopCat as well, a little bit more visual on there. I also want to say about TopCat in that we should market it in the sense that it is free, because I know that there's a lot of schools that are duplicating resources out there and that are spending valuable public education money on these types of programs when they have one right here available to them, free of charge, provided by the state. So I think that's another area in which we need to go and to promote TopCat, so that obviously they can use those dollars that they're providing to vendors in a different fashion, perhaps paying more for the actual testing or some type of financial aid for the students. So that's another piece we want to go towards. But in that third page of your report, you'll see a relaunching plan for marketing 2007. And if you'll notice, as you go through here, there are 3 target audiences. Halfway down that page, there's target audience 1, which has been identified as public high school educators and who all that might be in the service centers, some objectives on how we get TopCat out, some messages and how we're going to convey it, the venues that need to be used, some tools. And then if you go to the next page, and I won't go over everything, but I just wanted to, this is a little bit harder to read because it's a lot of information, and I do want to point out that on the next page, target audience 2 talks about the university staff and student services and their outreach and recruitment departments and areas, and very much the same information. And then our third target audience, the high school students and families of high school students. One of the things that I learned about marketing and working with a marketing firm in Fort Worth and helping us to launch a campaign that we're doing on offering student enrichment after the regular school day, after school tutoring services, that sort of thing, and needing to really drill down to the students who needed the information, who needed to be participants there, and their families, to help make sure that they had the transportation, they had the ability to stay after school and receive these services. From that marketing firm that we worked with, not only were the posters and the idea, the theme design, to get the students interested in this CSI program is what they called it, but also I asked them, how often do you market it? You know, if we got a postcard out, Dr. Phillips, can I borrow that for just a second? If we sent this information out at TopCat and we sent it out to all of the counselors and the parents and all in January of '07. Is that sufficient? And they said absolutely not. That you continue with the marketing effort. It's an ongoing marketing program, and that's where I feel as though we need to stop with the hit and miss idea, but instead go towards a strategic plan to where we know who received this information, when they received this information, the purpose of this information, and then our next steps to follow up with this type of information, who's going to receive it, when they're going to receive it, and then actually go out there and get surveys and feedback as to the effectiveness of this information and how well it was disseminated, how well it was read, and then even prior to that, looking at focus groups to say, will this really take you to the TopCat website if you look at that? Is this going to draw your attention to the message that we're trying to create and we're trying to put out there to you? So those are some of the ideas that we've talked about. And around our staff table as well, we've talked about even Walmart. Where does everyone go? And a lot of our audiences obviously visit Walmarts, and possibly doing some information there with Walmarts or through the scanner for your credit card when you have to read that information, putting some information out there. Possibly. We've seen it at PetSmart, for instance. If you go to PetSmart, you'll see if you want to donate $1 to the pet adoption agencies or whatever, and you have that opportunity to say yes or no and that sort of thing. So, just some ideas.
When does the governor send out his letter that we approved? Could that go in with that letter? Now, that goes to seniors, but could we send something out to ninth graders to the governor's office? Or
the governor's letters are in the process of still going out. We've been submitting those to 10th graders for about the past month or so, and we've been doing that in phases because of the funding, because it has been so expensive, and because we did give the school the option of sending those letters out themselves, and we would just ship them in bulk to them, or sending us the labels and we would actually label them and then postage them ourselves. And it's costing us about $10,000 to send out 30,000 of those letters. And those letters are being stuffed along with what else, Peggy, is in that envelope?
There's a brochure, TopCat's in the brochure.
And TopCat's in there.
If I may say something, I am probably the world's most unresponsive person to advertising. And all of the discussion has used the word TopCat, and that means nothing to a student. And I'm wondering if the heading instead of TopCat were ACT, SAT, free tutoring, something that would mean something to a student. I think that could improve responsiveness. I know on our website we use TopCat as the label, but if you don't know what that is, I just wonder if the size of the lettering, by reversing the ACT, SAT information and then TopCat, might not make it catch the eye of more individuals.
Right, and that's a good point. In fact, that is one of the things that we have looked at is advertising. And here again, it depends on your audience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you say free, well, the student may not pick it up as quickly as the counselor, the teacher, the principal, or the superintendent when you say free, but then when you say or parent, right? And so when you say the SAT, ACT, you know, obviously you're going to get attention from the counselor.
That's a great point, Jen.
Yes.
Yeah. But I am totally unresponsive to advertising, and so that the label is maybe hiding what you're trying to say.
Do we really have to pay for this? I mean, couldn't we get, like, our partners in the business community, like the, phone companies to print this on their phone bills? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to think of all the things that go out. It costs them $0 to print it on there. It costs us a whole bunch.
Right. I think, again, that is the type of innovation, the type of ideas that the staff is pulling together and generating, that we're wanting an advertising firm to come in and tell us what's most effective, how we might do this. Peggy, could you join us here?
The other thing to think about, and I think about CFT, again, when we talked about Top Cat to CFT last month, everybody on that phone said, that's a great deal. Why don't more people know about that? And
Exactly.
John Montford included, that was on the phone with us. So, again, there may be an opportunity there because there was a lot of interest in, the Top Cat by that group. So.
I think Chris made a really important point. I think we're thinking about all this like old people. And wait a minute. I'm serious, because our customer is the student. We want the students to know this. They'll take it and go with it, like Elaine said.
Right, and I think after all this discussion, I find it interesting that target one audience is still the public educators, and perhaps the students need to be our target one audience, and everything stems from there, because they won't see a phone bill, really. And really the advertising companies that are, focused in on message connectivity to a particular action by a target audience is really where we need the help.
It is, and I'm not sure we need all this assessment, because we can just look at the hits and see what we get.
And as a matter of fact, we have talked about directly for the students, and what do you see students with in their hands at all hours of the day?
Well,
Exactly.
there's a lot of products that are hitting them very, very well, from iPods.
Oh, yeah. Why do they all know about MySpace?
This is
they
not
don't know about Top Cat. Well, it's because the MySpace people are thinking like young people. In fact, they are young people.
That's why we need experts, and I applaud the effort of looking outside.
But we need
to connect us to that.
Right. And I'll also say that when I was given the HB1 portion and the 2.5 positions in there, one of those immediately that I knew that we wanted was a marketing intern. So that we would have those new, young, fresh ideas with someone, at the college level.
I went to a great seminar at UT a couple of weekends ago about the new media, by the way, and it was really interesting. They talked about the need for message to stay consistent. It's the venue that's changed, but a lot of the other marketing approaches haven't. We have to stay on message and that sort of thing. So it's refreshing to hear that because the venues haven't changed doesn't mean everything's changed. It's just a new approach. You'll notice in here that we talked about a relaunch of Top Cat, and what that would do is notify. I think we've learned from the Go Centers early on that we needed to talk to the superintendents first and let it trickle down, as well as do the push up and pull down. Push up with the students and then pull down with the administration. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do is make sure that all the superintendents are aware of it, and all the folks at the up in the administrative offices are aware of Top Cat before it starts trickling down to the counselors that are on the ground with the students. That's where we initiated this last time, and I think that's where we might have lost some ground, was not starting at the top and letting it trickle down.
I think David and I took care of 210,000.
Appreciate it, yeah. So, and it, like someone else says, just reiterating the message over and over and over. One thing that when we talk about the online web portal, other states have put the test prep within the web portal itself, so it becomes a part of that whole package of services that students are using to prepare for college.
But I think because I worked on Top Cat early on, one of the components of Top Cat, and this is something that I guess we need to really look at, I think part of our effort in going toward the schools is the component of Top Cat that provides the schools with information about what the students are doing. So it goes beyond just giving the student the test prep, but it informs the school, and even at the district level, if they want the information, how the students are doing with this online test prep, and it can help inform what the schools need to be doing to move students forward. So that is a component of this that I think we need to determine, is that an important component that we still need to make sure the superintendents and principals and counselors understand is that they have the option of getting feedback on all the students in their campus or district that are using this thing.
And that's great, so long as the students are doing it.
Right,
Because
exactly.
If they're not doing it,
Right.
they don't have any data. So really, it goes back again to the student. And that's a great, healthy byproduct. But it's driven from the students.
Well, I think that's true. 70% of students are starting at community colleges. I mean, are those students planning on taking the SAT or the ACT anyway? I mean, is that in their plan? I don't know. I mean, there are probably a lot of students that do take the test and go on to community college, but I don't know that.
I think our job is to make those statistics change,
Yeah, but
you know, that we're heading more students to baccalaureate and every, higher ed.
So, yeah, and another thing what we're really doing is working more closely with the universities to implement this program. The universities have a very vested interest in seeing SAT and ACT scores raised. They have a very vested interest in seeing more students take those tests. So we're working with them to make sure that the links on all of their web pages under prospective students, all of them have that on their web pages, and also that they're making it a part of their outreach efforts.
Is there a way that when students get their PSAT results, that there would be something about Top Cat? Because most school districts are going toward paying for all of their students to take the PSAT.
If the College Board would allow us to do something like that. Yeah.
That's probably a competing product.
Yeah, I think they've got their own
Because
product.
they have their own
Probably so.
online prep.
Maybe we can stick it in there.
You can do it illegally. Good idea. Well, and the other thing that we approach the school districts with is the fact that GRE is available on there. So if they've got any employees that are going back to earn their master's degrees, they can take advantage of that.
Meeting with a number of College Board folks next week, including the president.
Well, there you go.
Gonna be here next week.
It's free too, right? The college prep stuff that they have is also free. So
Yeah,
why did we decide to do Top Cat since there was that instrument there that was already?
Well, I'm not sure that it is free. I mean, it may be free.
It is.
It is.
I mean, I looked at it online, just like it's same deal.
Well, I think this came out of, and this predates me, this came out of an effort probably started 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it came as a result of the work that ICUT, the independent colleges, were doing. And they got us connected with ZAP, understanding that there were a number of ISDs that were paying big dollars to provide this for students. So it was driven from what the ISDs were entering into and not so much the student perspective. How much they were paying for, I think it was Corpus Christi was paying $80,000 a year for this option. And so the staff at the time that was working on this, TEA and coordinating board staff, it was, is there something that we could do to offer this to all ISDs? So it really was, when we first got into it, it was driven not so much from the student perspective, but how it is that we could help students through the ISDs. So I think this shift in focus is certainly not where we came from, but I can understand that that's probably where we need to be in making this thing work. So.
I think, and I wasn't involved in that, but I think there are two things that are different from my understanding. One is what Lynette mentioned earlier, is the feedback to the schools, potentially on the performance of their students, which isn't part of what the College Board has. The other element is that at one site you have both the SAT and the ACT. Right. And so there's some advantage. I mean, earlier when I guess Peggy mentioned having Top Cat on the on the website, this website. Part of what's happening out there, if you look around, there are lots of things available even in Texas for students to go to, and they're just everywhere. It's everywhere, and so part of it is how do you get things where you don't have to. Students have the ability to search, and they can do that. But right now, there might be 7 or 8 sites associated. I mean, ICUT has something. We have our College for Texans, or each university has different components, and so one really has to be sort of diligent, I think, to sort of pull all these together. And we also have a lot of duplicate efforts. I'm struck by, and this is part of what you're getting at as well, is that there are duplicate efforts, and we only have so many resources and money. How do we make the most of our resources possible. So when things are free, we ought to use the free things. But how do we get people to the same place and do more than just provide links? I mean, maybe MySpace helps those kids maybe provide some reviews for other folks in terms of which of these is really useful and which isn't. How do you get the feedback from students? I mean, we're sitting in here, we've all been to college.
And we already know, we've had these beautiful, really, truly fabulous marketing campaigns for Education Go Get It and all that, and we already know that a lot of those things did not work. So I would really urge us not to engage a contract with a marketing firm that, has a vested interest in our producing a lot of this old style stuff. I would urge you all to look at our new our new information age and how we can be in contact with every single student. And we don't need to do a lot of this, I don't think. Spend this kind of money.
If you Google free SAT test prep Texas, Top Cat comes up as the number 3 out of 10 selections. There's SAT online test preparation free from the study hall, and then there's another one called SAT Plan Site, and then the third one would be Top Cat. No, it says number2.com. What does that mean?
That's generic name for it.
What I suggest we do, because we didn't get through the rest of the agenda, is I think all these comments are great. I think number one is SAT, ACT season will be coming up really October, November, getting ready, so we are at the first of the year. We got a point, and what I'm hearing loud and clear is, again, Catherine is on the side, is how do we think outside the box a little bit, as opposed to just thinking inside the traditional marketing box. And again, before we, commit resources and a ton of money to it, is, at least by our next committee meetings, to come back and to talk about, even if you've engaged, I don't know if you've engaged a marketing firm, but if you start talking to them before we get too deep, is to start getting ideas as to how we can think about that target audience a little bit differently and presenting some ideas as to how we might do that. And again, y'all are the ones who drive it out. We understand that. We don't drive it out as board members. The staff drives it out. All we're trying to do is give suggestions. And so what we'd like to do is to see if you think those suggestions hold water and come back and make a report to us. But I think by the first quarter, we need to have a plan to be rolling, because we'll be in the middle of SAT, ACT before we can blink an eye.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity? Are y'all presenting it midwinter? Do you know?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Because that's every single administrator in the state of Texas. I mean, every single school district.
Don't we normally have a booth?
We have in the past, Ron attended the last TASB conference, and I think they were a little disappointed in the turnout that they received. The feedback on, I can't.
Yeah, definitely. The 3 times I guess, we had a booth. Most of the interest came from superintendents or board members that had children that were going to college. It was not so much.
More than a booth, maybe it's too late for a presentation because it's in January, but the midwinter is going to be piggybacked with the Texas Association of Partners in Education, which is this humongous parent group, and they're going to be doing it at the same time, same place. So that would be an opportunity to hit parents and administrators. But really, more than a booth, if you can find a hook, or like at TASB, and where Raymond, you and Shirley make a presentation jointly or whatever, to integrate that.
As long as it's a plenary session, I think it'd be great and beneficial to everybody there.
Yeah.
Problems I've had in the past is going to these conferences where they have 15 or 16 breakout sessions and you have 10 people in your audience.
Yeah.
It kind of defeats the purpose of going out and presenting this information to 10 people that kind of get bored of this.
That's true.
And align the resources to hit the target audience.
Yeah.
We will come to you with proposals to market these tools.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Agenda item 7, PP16 field specialist update. If anybody has to get up and excuse themselves, because I know I will in a minute, let's don't stop the meeting. Let's keep on rolling. Then we can just stage our breaks. And if I step out, I know Ms. Bricker will. Okay. And I know that we want to talk about the AmeriCorps Vista project. Is Chris going to do this?
Yes. This goes back to something we started discussion about probably about 3.5 years ago with AmeriCorps, and finally got something off here in the San Antonio area. And basically the partnership involves the coordinating board, VISTA members, and the San Antonio communities and schools, and working with 10 target schools in the San Antonio area, and utilizing the VISTA members at the Go Centers, actively engaging the students in promoting the college-going culture at the local level. We've finalized our 10 VISTA members. They've gone to training. Actually, they're in training this week, and tomorrow, what is the day one? Yeah, tomorrow and Friday. And Tracy will be joining Mario to provide the training for them. We designated one of our field specialists as the point of contact for the VISTA project, and he is the one responsible for the training. They are going to be providing, again, hands-on. They're going to be resources in the Go Centers, help the Go Center sponsor in promoting not only the information that needs to be conveyed in the Go Center, but also activities outside the Go Center in the community, in the school, and help, again, provide that bigger college-going culture than just come to the Go Center and let's do stuff in here. It's really about conveying the message outside the classroom as well. And I'm happy to announce that of the 10, we have 5 recent college graduates, and we have 5 retirees. So we have a good blend with the VISTA volunteers, or the VISTA members, and of the 5 retirees, I think 4 of them come from an education background. So it's really great to have former teachers, administrators, counselors be involved in this. And Dr. Brown attended we had a kind of a appreciation meeting where they came in and we had lunch, and we just thanked them for their time and efforts for this upcoming year. And one of the former guidance counselors actually said something that we all know, but I want to state it here, is he stated that out of the 23 plus years that he was a counselor, he said he had so little time with the students. It was ridiculous, and that's why he's coming back and doing this on a voluntary basis to engage the students that he didn't have a chance to do when he was an actual counselor. So it speaks to the issues that we have to address in the field, in the K-12 sector, and this is somebody from a very humble upbringing and knew that education was the key, but couldn't really provide that type of guidance and advisement that those students needed because of all the other administrative duties that were on his table. So again, the project starts off really hardcore in the spring. We're going to bring on 10 more VISTA members the following fall. And Tracy's been the point of contact for the San Antonio area, so she's going to be the one working very closely with this project.
They also give a scholarship.
Yes, they get a stipend at the end of their year commitment.
Incredible. That's just wonderful.
So it's promoting education in both, with the volunteers and the students. And once we get to the feedback from CIS, and CIS is going to be a little different in the sense that we're going to actually get access to these individual students' records. They're going to provide us with really strong data on each of these students. They work very closely with Upward Bound. They work very closely with other programs within the school district. So we're going to get really good data to support these efforts in San Antonio. And if this proves something that it's a successful model, what we're going to want to do is replicate it across the state with the CIS Texas and the other CIS directors across Texas. So that's something we're really looking forward to and getting feedback on. And we'll be giving updates as we progress down that path.
CIS is an absolutely excellent source and resource for us. That's great. I mean, it's really wonderful.
And everybody is familiar with communities and schools, I'm assuming. I don't want to be too presumptuous, but that's kind of the project we wanted to highlight, since that's something that we just got off the ground. And I know Mr. Ryder brought up the issue of effectiveness of the field specialists and whatnot. And we're starting to see is we're trying to get them more involved in projects across the state. They're getting very involved they're being brought into HB1 activities. They're being brought into the P16 Council activities. they're being brought into numerous activities across the board, so that way they're just not seen as, you're going to set up our Go Center and help train our G-Force members. That's not the idea of the P16 field specialists. We've only had them on board for 10 months now, so in order to evaluate them effectively, we feel that we need to kind of make sure that we have a longer look at what they're doing in the field right now. The first 7 or 8 months was really setting up the Go Centers, revamping the Go Centers after we got the feedback on the UNT evaluation and integrated those changes into our Go Center manual. So we want to make sure we had time to integrate those changes, have a chance to look at the Go Centers of the high school, and then start looking at those feeder middle schools that feed into those target schools, and look at those middle schools a little more closely as well, and moving the middle school Go Center, middle school model down to the Go Center model down to the middle school. And there's a lot of activity going on across the state. As you can see, out of the 21 field specialist positions that we have 3 that are still unfilled. 1 has just gone through the interview process, and Belinda, y'all made a final determination on that one in the Lower Valley, the field specialist position. Have y'all finalized that already? Not yet. Okay, I know they finished the interviews, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll know for sure for the person down in South Texas. Amarillo College is one that the individual resigned, and then the person in the southeast sector, which is Ron Brown sector, they resigned as well due to other commitments. So we have 2 current vacancies, 3 with El Paso Community College. They never actually have field specialists in place, but we're really looking at getting everybody up to speed and getting all the positions filled, and making sure that we're getting good, solid reports back from the field with regard to not only the Go Center activity, but all the other activity they're involved in.
Chris, and I read through all this, there is a lot of activities right now, but the thing that, again, I want to drive us towards now that we've almost got a year under our belt, is we've made a commitment to the CFT board to provide them with a quarterly update, and Catherine knows this, of basically how effective we are being, because all the initiatives that we asked them to fund, we asked them to convert our part-timers to full-time, we've asked them to fund TopCat, we've asked them to fund part of the Web Tool project, we've asked them to fund part of the college G-Force. And again, I don't think I'm overstating it, but I think I heard enthusiasm around all those initiatives. I heard from the board, we really like those initiatives, we like what we're hearing, we want to hear on a quarterly basis how effective are we being with those tools and with those people, so that we can get behind the funding. So, and we're going to need that outside funding, we know that. So, am I overstating that, Don?
Sure, that's well stated.
And so I think, and we challenged Catherine at that meeting and said we've got to find a way, now we've got a year under our belt, as to how we do that. And I mean, there's a lot of activities, but it's, and I think they're good activities, because there's a lot of, a lot of good work on P316s and all sorts of other activities, but we've got to figure out how to measure that and how to communicate it effectively on a periodic basis. One, for ourselves, so we know we're being effective. That's probably the number one, requirement. And secondly, is also to be able to continue to solicit outside funds.
And just to respond to that, I think the projects that we're trying to implement across the state really are going to be tied directly to the success or the impact that the P16 field specialists are having. We've got a conference call this afternoon, for instance, with the Texas High School Project, one of the program officers at the Community Foundations of Texas. I attended the Texas High School Projects Conference, I guess it was about a month ago, in Dallas, and Alma Garcia is actually one of the former Go Center promoters down in the Brownsville area, who got hired by the Community Foundations of Texas and asked me to go up and present on Go Centers to the other Texas High School Project attendees. And it had a pretty good, about 20 people in the audience. Again, it was a breakout session with about 7 or 8 parallel sessions going on. So to get 20, I was pretty glad to have that. Afterwards, she did share with me an interest in replicating Go Centers in the Texas High School projects, in the schools that she works with the early college high school, and then also talking to her fellow program officers and promoting them in the math and science academies and the STEM academies and the high school redesign projects. So if we get all the Texas high school projects involved in this, number one, we're going to get more data that unfortunately is not readily available to us because we don't have access to each individual student's profile. But if we partner with the right people, I think we'll be able to get that data to support the efforts that we're conducting in the field and the impact we're having on those individual students. And the bottom line is, how many students are we impacting? And, unfortunately, until we hit 2015 and close the gaps and are we at the numbers, or did we exceed those numbers, that's the bottom line. But I know there's interim numbers or interim targets we need to hit in order to assess the effectiveness, and that's where we're trying to partner with the appropriate folks, the appropriate entities, to ensure that we get that data to support our efforts. And I've also got a call in from the Hispanic Scholarship Fund director of Texas that wants to partner with us again. We had a partnership with them a couple years ago, and that's working with the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, current recipients, and then the alumnus. So getting really involved with a lot of different groups out there. And we also submitted an AmeriCorps grant proposal. I guess it was earlier or last week. Staff members in our division worked on it to get about 80 AmeriCorps members, which is different than AmeriCorps Vista members, for the Central Texas, East Texas area. So it covers the Tyler area and Waco and Austin area, so it's a little relevant.
You haven't heard anything on that, have you? So. Thanks, Chris. Other questions for Chris? Well, I came in late. Is there anything else we need to follow up from earlier discussion?
I don't think so, except for I was going to add a couple of things with regard to P16. Leticia and Ron and I attended a meeting at Northbrook High School, and it's in Spring Branch, and it's on the north side of I-10. I think they said that there were 85% of the kids qualified for free and reduced lunch, and about 80% of those were on free and reduced lunch. They actually were identified, and so we're working with a program to where we can provide FAFSA information to these kids, and the principal is really dynamic, and the staff was, very willing. They have an amazing Go Center that would make everybody jealous. It's large. It's fully staffed from a Gear Up grant, actually, with a teacher who has a degree in journalism, I believe, English, and journalism. And she's working with all these students, and she says, I'm basically their other mother, and I'm telling them, you're going to write your essay, you're going to, and it was really very rewarding meeting, and so we're following up on that. And the other thing is I had a meeting with Dr. Winerty, who's the CEO of the Texas Medical Center, and I think after I left, I realized that, I probably didn't ask him for enough, because people that usually come to him probably ask him for a whole lot, but I asked if he would meet with all the directors of the hospitals throughout the Houston area and put up banners in the nurseries where, babies are born, so that their parents can see the sign that says college graduate class of 2028. And he said, yeah, we can do that. And he was very excited about that. So then I thought, well, let me ask you for something else. But the other thing that he did tell me, this is a little bit off subject, but I'll be quick. He was part of the original group that formed what was the basis of the formation of the coordinating board. And he made several suggestions about, different directions that we might want to take and kind of our mission and goal. And I thought maybe it might be good for us in the near future to kind of maybe gather some of those people back and say, where did you see us going? And, where are we going, and what are some suggestions? So, yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, I think Commissioner Mel already covered most of it.
Yeah, it would take me just a minute to fill in the rest. We had our second meeting yesterday with deans of schools of education and deans of arts and sciences. Shirley Mealy and I convened them, and we talked about, we asked what they were doing in regard to HB1, and after their presentations, we talked about things that they ought to be looking at. I mentioned already the whole question of faculty rewards for participating in K-12 activities. We talked about the challenges of the 4x4 curriculum and the need to improve the rigor with which teachers can instruct, and we talked about how we would have to work together to provide more professional development for in-service teachers, given the fact that, once again, HB 1 sets a much higher standard for what teachers need to do in the classroom. And it was a very lively discussion, and they're eager to continue talking, so we're going to convene them again in the spring and get progress reports. We did talk about my presentation to the state school board a couple of weeks ago, where there was a lot of complaining from state school board members that deans of schools of education are totally out of sync with what their goals are and what their values are, and that a lot of teachers are not prepared to teach phonics, and that a lot of teachers didn't know anything about tax, and that's unacceptable. So we are going to facilitate what we should expect will be a very interesting dialogue between members of the state school board and deans of schools of education. But it is striking that they don't speak. They haven't talked to one another. The deans pointed out that they speak frequently with their local superintendents, but there hasn't been a conversation between deans and members of the state school board in a systematic way. So we're going to organize that, I think, for late January?
It's during the midwinter conference.
Yeah.
So I think 30th or 31st is the target date.
And that's my report.
Okay. Any questions for Raymond on that at all? Good luck.
You got to start somewhere.
I commend you. College for All Texans Foundation, Don, and we can probably go through this. Hopefully, we've talked about you all day. We've brought you up 3 or 4 times about the new budget. So, why don't you give us a report on the board meeting?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, members, and friends. This has been a very enjoyable meeting. I just got to say, this idea about reaching young people by cell phones is pretty promising. I even ran into a guy in a bar, a wine bar. 3 weeks ago, who
gone too far.
He was telling about this business that he's involved in, which is developing marketing plans for getting messages as cell phones. Which I got a little survey. Most of us haven't received very many messages yet, but the prospects are that they're going to try to make that a major advertising medium. So I'm also really delighted to hear that Alma Garcia is pushing ahead with her desire to get the Go Centers built into the Texas High School project. She was one terrific Go Center leader, instigator down in Brownsville back several years ago. And to add to Chris's great report about this AmeriCorps Vista project, you notice there's several organizations involved in it: Coordinating Board, Communities in Schools, AmeriCorps Vista. Well, Gene Bender, the guy who we have the contract with to get this thing developed, has been trying to add on others. So he's got a commitment from our friend Tom Monfort to involve the AT&T Pioneers, which is composed not just of AT&T retirees, but people who are still working, as a group to encourage to come work in Go Centers, help out in Go Centers. So part of the idea is to leverage potentially a great army of old people to come in and help. The big question is, can old people communicate with young people or not? We'll know, I guess, after a few months. So you have the report on the foundation in your material, which shows the funds that we have continued to grow. Shows that we only have right now one proposal out. There'll be a series of these coming, but that was the proposal that Ken referred to, that Catherine's staff has just been great in putting together. We did get formal approval back in September for what we had assumed would occur, and that was the approval for these 10 AmeriCorps Vista members, which we are told has an in-kind value of $40,000 per year times each AmeriCorps Vista volunteer because of the federal funds that are put into it. So that's a very encouraging resource as well. At since I last reported to you, the College for All Texans trustees had its annual meeting on October 27th. Chairman Ryder was there along with a number of others. One of the good news was that Bob Shepard had determined that Pam Williford, who used to be on the trustees, has agreed to come back on it, so he promptly appointed her. Janie McGarr, who used to be a coordinating board member from the Dallas area, agreed to be elected as a trustee. We're still on the hunt for really good people from the Houston area and the Dallas-Fort Worth area and El Paso to come on the board, and we're trying to move ahead steadily with nurturing those people. Raymond has done a great job of adding some more people to that list, and Wally Ricker. So if you have any other suggestions there, that would be great. There were, just highlight a total of 5 important decisions that were made at the Board of Trustees meeting, I think. I already mentioned Janie McGarr and Pam Williford coming aboard, but a very important step was taken, as the chairman mentioned, that the trustees endorsed the coordinating board's 6 priority areas for additional funding. So those are the ones that will drive our fundraising effort now, and will lead to a whole series of proposals going out to people. And your off-stated willingness to help out on that, to meet with people who are potential donors we can finally draw on to help out with that over the next several months. The other important decision was to further reinforce what the chairman said about the importance of us developing a system of data related to the goals and objectives for anything we're trying to do, so those can be communicated to funders as well as to ourselves to know where we're getting our money's worth with the money going into it. I hope all of you got a copy of the periodic newsletter, the Gap Closing Gazette, electronically. The next issue is due to go out in February, so if you have any suggestions for articles or anything you want to cover in it, we'll do that. Great support from people on the outside, and especially, of course, the coordinating board staff in helping to put that together. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to respond to any questions or suggestions you will have.
Questions for Don at all? I just want to thank you, Don, for, I heard, again, risk of repeating myself, excitement on the part of the board about the more targeted focus on initiatives that as they understood what we were trying to do, there was enthusiasm around that table. I think the other thing is as we get these grants on the table, is to leverage all the board members on the coordinating board. I mean, as we've talked about it, we all said that's so critically important if we're going to the Houston endowment. I mean, we need to talk.
Especially with, I think one of your suggestions or ideas was that getting support for P16 field specialists ought to be a relatively easy sale in regions around the state as well, to get some local support for those, if the perception is it's a worthwhile investment.
I think the key there would be putting a grant request together, and then if we're going to West Texas or wherever, South Texas or wherever, that we just engage that board member to help open the door. So, good. Thanks, Don.
Can I mention one other thing? One other funding priority besides generating money to enable really important initiatives that are aiming to close the gaps is that we realize that our fully discretionary grants are gradually running out. So that creates a need over the next several years to figure out how we finance the operation of the foundation, which has about a $180,000 budget. Commissioner and Ms. Ricker, I think, had some ideas on that, other people as well.
I just reminded her.
Lest I forget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are you going to write a check?
No, I think you are.
Agenda item 10 is, again, we've talked a lot about this already, but about the proposal for how we're going to use the money that's being allocated out of the HB1 funding, which is about $3.7 million. Well, I don't know who's going to report on this. I think we've covered the majority of
I
this.
don't know that we really need a report. I
meeting.
think it's pretty clear.
We talked about earlier. And I think when we talked about the summer bridge programs, the developmental education, and the regional P through 16 councils. So, and for the committee, the total pool money that we get is
11 million.
11. I was saying 11 or 12 million.
And then in addition to that, there is the 3 million, the 11 million followed the basic House Bill 1 coordinating board assignments. In addition to that, the coordinating board now has $3 million to support funding up to 3 education research centers, plus about $168,000 for Susan to increase staff to get all of our data ready. I don't understand how it all works, but we do some conversions for FERPA purposes before it can be made available. And then the $750,000 that can support the governor's schools is in addition to that. And you will see some of those changes in an item, I believe, for a budget change in January for the agency, because we didn't know we were going to get this money. We knew about the 11 million, but not the other money.
And we will get that money every...
Well, the 11 million, as I understand it, was a direct transfer.
Okay.
So
That would be a recurring
that money
payment.
is a part of our base LAR. Now, I may not be using the exact right language on that, but it continues. The optional money is the 3 million plus that administrative money plus the 750.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the last item is a review of the January board meeting agenda items. And Lynn, do you want to go through those?
Very quickly, one of the things we have never done before that we're going to do this time is have an excellent showcase, bringing in the Star Award winners. There are 5 of those, asking them specifically to focus on not just what their program is, but on how it can be replicated. What would another institution need to be able to do? What kind of commitments have to be made? That sort of thing. So all 5 have accepted. They're all very excited about being here. We're going to struggle to keep their formal presentation to 5 minutes. And they all agree to it, and then things happen. So otherwise, we'll just have a huge amount of time there. We will have an update on House Bill 1. We will include with it the challenges section and let you know where we are. We're asking you to adopt that P16 College Readiness and Success Strategic Plan that we talked about earlier, that's already been adopted by the P16 State P16 Council. Then we have 2 sets of rules. One of those is focused on more of the college readiness language from House Bill 1. The second of those is related to resident status. And as I understand it, Jane, this does 2 things, right? It deals with the language related to homeschool students, but they're called what in that? Not homeschooled, it's non-traditional.
Students who have successfully completed a secondary program, there's some relatively long
I think it has non-traditional in it, but it's really targeted toward our rules being fair to homeschoolers.
And this is really clarifying the language that, Bill, if necessary, could talk about to a greater extent, but existing rules actually permitted this, and this is to make clear to everyone that it is permitted, so you don't have to come back for clarification in the future.
And the other piece of that, as I remember it, deals specifically with cleanup language in the residency rules related to the core questions that a student has to be able to respond to. Right. And we've had the core questions in our rules. We're asking to move them to the outside because we need to be able to deal with those. We'll refer to them. But instead of having to constantly come back to you saying, this one needs to be changed this way, we would have that as a separate document. Is that close?
That is very close, yes.
This is a small thing, but just so you know that the excellent showcase has been moved to the end of this particular agenda.
Yes.
It makes a better transition from the college readiness into the HB1 issues.
That's right, David, and I forgot to do that. The final thing is, I'd just like for you to answer a question for me. We are purchasing Dave Conley's book called College Knowledge for the board members, and I need to know, do you think the board would like to have them ahead of time, or do you want us to hand them to you that day when he's here?
No. We'd like the board members to try to read the book beforehand, so we want to get them to them right away.
Well, we have the Amazon.com order ready.
Some board members have copies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
See, I think we have,
It's been hit or miss.
but we're going to order a large number of them because we need them for a lot of different purposes if we move forward.
All of them same.
Well, I have it all done up on my desk. We can go ahead and put that forward. That's it for me.
General comment about the agenda, just so you'll know that you can expect the full board agenda on Monday.
Gotcha.
Right.
I'm gonna be okay.
Oh, thank you to everybody for coming in during the holidays, and I just want to take this opportunity to say one, thanks to our committee members, but really thanks to the staff, and I really mean that sincerely to all of y'all. I hope everybody has a blessed holiday. Y'all have done a great job this year, working through a lot of issues, and it's so, even though there's a lot of suggestions, this is a bunch of A-type personalities on this committee.
Speak for yourself. Feel kind of laid back. Me too.
I will say that this group has a real sincere interest in the work of this agency, and I think I speak for everybody in saying that. And we're an advocate and closing the gaps. And we just thank you for all your work. You've done a great job this year. So, and have a blessed Christmas. We'll stand adjourned. I guess that's the only action we have is. We have a motion to adjourn, Ms. Burford?
Absolutely.